A warm welcome to Infidelity Tales Lab. Thank you for supporting our channel. Quick question before we start. Where are you tuning in from today? East Coast? West Coast? Another continent entirely? Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Gift. Harrison Flynn had always believed in grand gestures. As a successful investment strategist at Meridian Capital, he'd accumulated enough wealth to live comfortably, but he never flaunted it. Instead, he chose to surprise his wife Bianca with what he believed would be the ultimate gift: financial freedom. The son of a steel mill worker from Pittsburgh, Harrison grew up watching his father work 16-hour shifts to put food on the table. His mother, a part-time seamstress, spent evenings mending clothes for extra income. Their struggles shaped Harrison's views on money, responsibility, and loyalty. He'd promised himself his family would never know such hardship. When he met Bianca Russo during his second year at Wharton Business School, she was a first-year medical student drowning in student loans but burning with ambition. Her fierce intelligence and determination captivated him. Where Harrison was calculated and methodical, Bianca was passionate and spontaneous. They balanced each other perfectly, or so he thought. "Med school is killing me," she confessed on their third date. "Sometimes I wonder if it's worth the debt." "It is," he'd assured her. "You'll be an amazing doctor." Throughout their 8-year marriage, Harrison watched Bianca transform from an uncertain medical student into a respected cardiologist. He'd supported her through residency, fellowship, and the establishment of her practice. They delayed having children at her request. Her career came first, and Harrison respected that. She needed time to establish herself, to pay off her crushing student debt, to become financially independent. Or at least, that's what she'd told him. Harrison spent months secretly working with their financial advisor, transferring funds, liquidating some of his personal investments. The timing felt perfect. Bianca had just been offered a partnership at Phoenix Medical Associates, a prestigious cardiology group. This would be the start of their real life together. Free of debt, they could finally think about starting a family. The morning he transferred the final payment, $237, $500, he brought her favorite almond croissants and coffee home. He'd arranged small wrapped gift boxes in a trail from their bedroom to the kitchen, each containing a clue. The final box held a printout of the loan payoff confirmation with a simple note: "For all your dreams. All paid off. I love you." He expected tears of joy, perhaps disbelief. What he got was different. "What is this?" Bianca asked, her dark eyes scanning the document. "I paid off your medical school loans," Harrison said, smiling. "All of them. You're debt-free." She looked up, and something flickered across her face. Not gratitude, but something closer to annoyance, quickly masked. "You pay my loans?" "Without discussing it with me first." Harrison's smile faltered. "I wanted it to be a surprise." "That's $250,000, Harrison. We should have talked about this. I used my personal investments. It doesn't affect our joint finances." Bianca sighed, folding the paper. "Thanks, I guess. I had a plan for those loans, you know." "A plan besides paying them off?" Harrison asked, confusion clouding his features. "Income-based repayment, loan forgiveness options, tax strategies." She shrugged. "Never mind. It's done now." She kissed his cheek, a perfunctory gesture, and left for work. No excitement, no relief, no real gratitude. That evening, Harrison returned home early to prepare a celebration dinner. He'd reserved 2 weeks at a villa in Tuscany as a second surprise, a delayed honeymoon they'd never taken because of Bianca's rigorous medical training. As he chopped vegetables in the kitchen, he heard Bianca's key in the door. She didn't come to greet him, but instead remained in the foyer, her voice low as she spoke on her phone. "I know, Lydia. I almost lost it when he showed me the papers." Her sister had always been her closest confidant. "No, I didn't tell him. How could I? Thanks for paying my debts so I can afford to leave you." Harrison froze, knife suspended over the cutting board. "Good. Now that's cleared, I can finally afford the divorce lawyer," Bianca continued. "Vincent said his guy is the best, but the retainer alone is 15 grand. Vincent. The name landed like a physical blow. Vincent Delgado, the new managing partner at her practice. Tall, divorced, with gray at his temples and a reputation for dating his colleagues. I just need a few more weeks to get everything in order. Harrison doesn't suspect anything. She appeared in the kitchen doorway then, phone still pressed to her ear. Her face drained of color as she saw Harrison standing there. "Lydia, I'll call you back," she whispered, ending the call. The silence stretched between them, a chasm 8 years in the making. "How long?" Harrison asked, his voice eerily calm. Bianca lifted her chin. "Does it matter?" "How long?" Each word carried the weight of betrayal. 6 months. Her voice held no remorse, only resignation that she'd been caught. "I was going to tell you after the partnership became official next month." "And Vincent?" She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Harrison set down the knife with deliberate care. "I see. Harrison, does he know I just paid off your loans?" A flush crept up her neck. "That's not relevant." "It seems extremely relevant to me." Harrison's voice remained steady, but something had changed in his eyes. A coldness, a calculation. "Especially since I just funded your divorce. It wasn't planned this way." "No." Harrison laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Then the timing is remarkably convenient." Bianca shifted uncomfortably. "What are you going to do?" Harrison studied his wife of 8 years, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. The woman he'd supported, believed in, sacrificed for. The woman who'd been planning to discard him the moment he was no longer useful. "What am I going to do?" he repeated softly. "Nothing yet, but I think you should pack a bag, Bianca. I believe this conversation requires some privacy." "You're kicking me out?" Her voice rose indignantly. "This is my house, too. Is it? I seem to recall paying for it. Just like I paid for your education. Just like I paid for everything." Each word was measured, controlled. "Consider tonight the beginning of a very expensive lesson for both of us." Bianca's face hardened. "You can't just." "I can and I will. You have 30 minutes. Then I'm changing the locks." She stared at him, perhaps seeing for the first time the steel beneath his accommodating exterior. Without another word, she turned and walked upstairs. Harrison remained in the kitchen, continuing to prepare the meal that would never be shared. His mind, however, was already calculating, planning, strategizing. They wanted to take everything from him. He would give them nothing but regret. Chapter 2. The Assessment. 3 days after Bianca moved out, Harrison sat across from Denise Montgomery, one of Philadelphia's most ruthless divorce attorneys. Her office overlooked Rittenhouse Square, the autumn leaves creating a fiery backdrop behind her silver-streaked hair. "So let me understand," Denise said, reviewing his documents. "You paid off your wife's medical school loans days before discovering she was planning to divorce you for her colleague?" "Correct." Harrison's voice betrayed no emotion. "And you have proof of the affair?" "Not yet, but I will." Denise raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Flynn, spite is expensive. If you're hiring me to punish your wife." "I'm hiring you to protect what's mine," Harrison interrupted. "Bianca didn't just betray our marriage. She orchestrated a financial strategy around it. She waited until her career was established, until her professional credentials were secured, with my support, before planning her exit." "That's marriage in America," Denise said dryly. "Pennsylvania is an equitable distribution state. Without a prenup, she's entitled to a portion of marital assets regardless of who earned what. We don't have a prenup." Harrison leaned forward. "But I do have detailed financial records of every dollar I've invested in her career, and I want those investments protected." Denise studied him. "How far are you willing to go?" "As far as necessary." She nodded slowly. "Then we need to start gathering intelligence." Immediately, Harrison left Denise's office with a clear directive: document everything, say nothing, and prepare for war. His first stop was a private investigation firm recommended by Miles Tanner, his oldest friend and a corporate security specialist. "Boyd Investigations," said the man, extending his hand. "I'm Drew Boyd." Drew wasn't what Harrison expected. Instead of a weathered ex-cop, he found himself facing a former military intelligence officer with multiple advanced degrees in computer science. His office was minimalist, high-tech, and extremely secure. "Miles speaks highly of you," Drew said. "Says you need discreet surveillance." "I need everything you can legally obtain on my wife and her lover," Harrison replied. And perhaps a few things that operate in gray areas. Drew didn't blink. Pennsylvania has two-party consent for recordings. However, there are workarounds within legal boundaries. For the next hour, they outlined a comprehensive investigation strategy. Bank records, phone records, electronic surveillance, physical surveillance. By the time Harrison left, he had committed $50,000 to the investigation, a small price for the truth. That evening, Harrison received a text from Bianca. "We need to talk about the house. I'm coming by tomorrow at 7. He didn't respond, but he was ready when she arrived the following evening. She'd clearly dressed to intimidate, in the tailored charcoal suit she wore for hospital board meetings, her dark hair swept into a sleek bun. "You've been ignoring my calls," she said, brushing past him into the foyer. "I've been busy." Harrison closed the door. "My schedule became unexpectedly open when my wife decided to move in with her lover." Bianca flinched. "I'm staying with Lydia." "Lie to your divorce attorney, not to me." Harrison gestured to the living room. "You wanted to talk. So talk." She remained standing. "I'm entitled to half of everything, Harrison, including this house." Interesting opening position. "It's not a position. It's the law." Harrison smiled thinly. "Did Vincent's attorney tell you that? The one you were so eager to hire with my money?" "Our money," she corrected. "And yes, I've retained counsel. Lawrence Whitfield." Harrison nodded. Lawrence Whitfield was good, aggressive, publicity-hungry, and expensive. Bianca was declaring her intentions. "Then we have nothing to discuss until our attorneys arrange a meeting." Bianca's composure slipped. "I don't want this to get ugly, Harrison. You forfeited any say in how this ends when you decided to betray me. It wasn't like that." She sighed. "We grew apart. You were always working. To support your career," he finished. "To pay off your debts. To build our future. A future I never asked for." The words burst from her. "You decided everything. Where we'd live, when we'd have children, how we'd spend our money. Did you ever once ask what I wanted?" Harrison stared at her. "I asked every day for 8 years. You said you wanted to focus on your career, because it was the only thing that was truly mine." She took a breath, composing herself. "This isn't productive. My attorney will contact yours." She turned to leave, then paused. "I need some of my things. Make a list. I'll have them packed." "Harrison." Her voice softened. "It doesn't have to be this way." His expression remained impassive. "It already is." After she left, Harrison poured himself a scotch and studied the wedding photo still displayed on the mantel. The signs had been there all along. Her increasing distance, her late nights at the hospital, her constant deflection whenever he mentioned starting a family. His phone chimed with a text from Drew Boyd. "First report ready. Photos attached." The images showed Bianca entering Vincent Delgado's upscale condo, using her own key. Timestamp: 3 hours before she'd arrived at Harrison's door. More photos followed. The two of them at dinner, holding hands across the table, kissing in his car, shopping for furniture. Another text arrived. Phone records indicate relationship began 9 months ago, not 6 as claimed. Financial investigation ongoing. Harrison set down his phone and walked to the window. 9 months. Around the time Bianca had suggested they keep their finances more separate for tax purposes. Around the time she'd insisted on a weekend medical conference in Chicago that he later discovered had been in Philadelphia. He'd been played for a fool. But not anymore. His phone rang. Miles Tanner. "How are you holding up?" Miles asked without preamble. "I'm fine." "Bullshit. I'm coming over." 30 minutes later, Miles arrived with a bottle of bourbon and the straightforward manner that had made him Harrison's closest friend since college. Unlike Harrison's approach to life, Miles was all decisive action and calculated risks. After a stint in the Marines, he'd built a security consulting firm that specialized in corporate protection, both physical and digital. "Boyd sent me copies of the preliminary report," Miles said, pouring them each a drink. "She's not even trying to be discreet. She thinks I'm too weak to fight back," Harrison said. "That I'll roll over like I always have." Miles studied his friend. "And will you?" Harrison met his gaze. "No, not this time." "Then what's the plan?" "Because Bianca and this Vincent character, They're operating like they've already won. They haven't even begun to play the game. Harrison swirled his bourbon. Did you look into Vincent Delgado like I asked? Miles nodded. Ambitious guy. 3 ex-wives, all of whom he left when better opportunities came along. He's angling to be the next chief of cardiology at Philadelphia General now that Dr. Rosenbaum is retiring. And Bianca, she's his ticket. Her research credentials, plus her new partnership at Phoenix Medical, make her valuable to him. She's been collaborating on his research papers, adding her name to his work. My sources say they're planning to launch a specialized cardiac treatment center together. Harrison absorbed this. So it's not just personal. It's professional advancement for both of them. Seems that way. And they're using your money to fund their launch. Miles hesitated. There's something else. Vincent's ex-wife, Adriana, reached out when she heard I was asking questions. She wants to meet you. Harrison raised an eyebrow. What? She wouldn't say. Just that she has information you might find useful. Harrison considered this. Set it up. As Miles left that night, he paused at the door. Harrison, I've known you 20 years. I've never seen you like this. Like what? Cold. Calculating. Miles studied him. Just don't lose yourself in this. Harrison's smile didn't reach his eyes. I'm not losing myself, Miles. I'm finding myself. After Miles left, Harrison returned to his study and opened his laptop. For the next several hours, he meticulously transferred funds between accounts, documented transactions, and compiled a detailed financial history of his marriage. Every dollar he'd invested in Bianca's career, every sacrifice he'd made. By dawn, he had constructed a complete financial timeline of their relationship. It told a story very different from the one Bianca was likely presenting to her attorney, a story of calculated opportunism and strategic betrayal. His phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. This is Adriana Delgado. Miles Tanner gave me your number. We should talk about Vincent and your wife. Meet me tomorrow, 3 p.m., Mercer Cafe. Harrison stared at the message, contemplating the chess pieces slowly moving into position. I'll be there, he replied. Chapter 3, The Alliance. Mercer Cafe buzzed with afternoon activity as Harrison claimed a corner table with good sight lines to both entrances. He recognized Adriana Delgado immediately when she walked in, poised and elegant, with the watchful eyes of someone who had learned painful lessons about trust. Mr. Flynn, she said, extending her hand. Thank you for meeting me. Call me Harrison, he replied, gesturing to the chair across from him. Adriana ordered tea and waited for the server to leave before speaking. I was wife number 2, she said without preamble. And I learned about wife number 1 the hard way, just like wife number 3 learned about me. And now my wife will be number 4? If Vincent gets what he wants. Adriana stirred her tea, which is why I wanted to meet. To make sure he doesn't. Harrison studied her. Why help me? We're strangers. Because Vincent doesn't just discard wives, he destroys them. Professionally, financially, personally. Her eyes hardened. I was chief resident when I met him. By the time our divorce was final, I'd lost my position, my reputation was in tatters, and I was starting over in a different specialty in a different city. Ow! Vincent has a pattern. He targets women with potential, women who can advance his career. He isolates them from friends and family, integrates himself into their professional work, and then, when he's extracted everything useful, he discards them while taking credit for their achievements. Harrison's expression didn't change, but his fingers tightened around his coffee cup. And you have proof of this? Adriana reached into her bag and pulled out a USB drive. I've been documenting his pattern for years. Research he stole from his first wife. Patient protocols he took from me. Innovations from his third wife's neurological practice that mysteriously appeared in his cardiac procedures. Why haven't you exposed him? Medical politics. She shrugged. Who would believe the bitter ex-wife over the brilliant Dr. Delgado? But now, she pushed the drive toward him. Now I have a willing partner with resources and motivation. Harrison pocketed the drive. What do you want in return? Justice. Adriana's smile was cold. I want Vincent to lose everything he values. His reputation, his position, his future. And Bianca, Adriana's expression softened slightly. Your wife is both victim and accomplice. Vincent's pattern is to find willing partners in his schemes. They believe they're equals until he no longer needs them. Harrison absorbed this. Tell me about this cardiac treatment center they're planning. Adriana's eyebrows rose. You know about that? I have resources too. She nodded appreciatively. They're applying for a major research grant from the Arlington Foundation, $15 million. With Vincent's reputation and Bianca's research credentials, they're favored to win. The announcement is in 6 weeks. And if they don't get it, their entire plan collapses. The treatment center is the centerpiece of Vincent's application for chief of cardiology. Without it, he's just another doctor with good credentials and a bad personal reputation. Harrison considered this. Who decides the grant recipients? A 5-person committee. I know 2 of them personally. Can they be persuaded? Adriana studied him. With the right evidence? Absolutely. As they continued talking, a strategy began to form. The Arlington Foundation grant was the linchpin of Vincent and Bianca's plans, both professional and personal. Without it, their carefully constructed future would crumble. I have one more question, Harrison said as Adriana prepared to leave. How long has Vincent been involved with my wife? Adriana's expression became guarded. What did Bianca tell you? 6 months. My investigator says 9. She shook her head. Try 18. I saw them together at a medical conference in Boston last spring. The timeline shifted dramatically in Harrison's mind. 18 months meant their affair began before Bianca's partnership discussions, before the loan repayment plans, before so many decisions he'd thought they'd made together. Thank you for your honesty, he said, his voice betraying nothing of the rage building inside him. One last thing, Adriana said, hesitating. Vincent and Bianca aren't just planning their professional future. They're planning a personal one, too. Harrison waited, a cold certainty settling over him. She's pregnant, Harrison, about 2 months along. Adriana's eyes held genuine sympathy. I'm sorry. I thought you should know. The revelation didn't shock him as much as it should have. It was simply the final piece of a puzzle he'd been assembling since that night in the kitchen. After Adriana left, Harrison remained at the cafe, working through the implications. The child, if it existed, changed nothing about his resolve, but added a new dimension to his strategy. His phone vibrated with a text from Drew Boyd, financial investigation complete. Conference call? 20 minutes later, Harrison sat in his car as Drew outlined his findings. Your wife has been siphoning money from your joint accounts into a separate account under her maiden name, Drew explained. Small amounts, starting 18 months ago, totaling just under $120,000. Traceable, completely. She wasn't particularly subtle about it. And Vincent, that's where it gets interesting. He's leveraged to the hilt. 3 expensive divorces, a condo he can barely afford, and significant gambling debts. He needs this Arlington grant desperately. Harrison absorbed this information. What about his research? The work he's supposedly doing with Bianca, mostly borrowed or outright stolen from others, according to the data Adriana provided. I cross-referenced with published papers and patent applications. At least 60% of their innovative approach was developed by other researchers, including Adriana herself. Can you document this definitively? Already done. The report is in your secure email. Harrison thanked him and ended the call, then dialed Miles. I need access to Philip Arlington, he said without greeting. Miles whistled low. The Arlington Foundation Arlington? That's a big ask, Harrison. Can you do it? His grandson Travis was in my unit overseas. We stay in touch. I might be able to arrange something, but Philip doesn't take meetings without good reason. Tell him I have information about potential fraud in his foundation's grant process. That should get his attention. There was a pause on the line. Harrison, what exactly are you planning? Justice, Harrison replied. Nothing more, nothing less. That evening, Harrison reviewed everything he'd learned. The pieces were falling into place. Bianca's systematic betrayal, Vincent's predatory pattern, their joint professional ambitions funded with Harrison's money. He opened his laptop and began composing an email to Denise Montgomery, outlining his discoveries and his proposed strategy. It wasn't just about the divorce anymore. It was about exposing a pattern of deception that extended far beyond his marriage. As he worked, another email arrived from Bianca. Harrison, my attorney advised against this, but I wanted to reach out personally. There are things you should know, things I should have told you long ago. I'm not proud of how I've handled this situation, and I owe you the truth. Can we meet tomorrow? Just to talk, no attorneys. There's something important I need to tell you. Bianca. Harrison stared at the screen, reading between the lines. Adriana had been right. Bianca was pregnant and wanted to control the narrative. He typed a brief reply. Tomorrow, 7 p.m. Our house. Then he continued working, mapping out the destruction of everything Bianca and Vincent had built on the foundation of his betrayal. Chapter 4. The Reconnaissance. The following morning, Harrison met with Denise Montgomery to outline his evolving strategy. We need to be very careful here, Denise warned, reviewing his evidence. Especially if there's a child involved. The child, if it exists, doesn't change the fact that Bianca systematically defrauded me, Harrison replied. She diverted marital assets while planning to leave, concealed an affair that began 18 months ago, and deliberately misled me about our future. All of which strengthens our position in the divorce, Denise agreed. But your plan to disrupt their professional aspirations, that goes beyond the divorce case. They're connected, Harrison insisted. Bianca didn't just betray our marriage. She used our marriage to advance her career with Vincent. My financial support, my connections, my resources, all leverage for their benefit. Denise studied him. You realize this approach will be messy. Public. I'm counting on it. She nodded slowly. Then we need to time this perfectly. When is your meeting with Philip Arlington? Tomorrow morning. And Bianca is coming to see you tonight? Yes. Record everything legally permissible. We want her admissions on the record. After leaving Denise's office, Harrison met with Miles at a security firm. The industrial chic space housed some of the most sophisticated surveillance technology available to the private sector. Everything's ready for tonight, Miles confirmed, showing Harrison a tablet. The house is wired with legal audio surveillance in all common areas. Video in the entrance, living room, and kitchen, all visible security cameras that she'll be aware of. And the other measures? Miles hesitated. Harrison, some of what you're asking for. Is it possible? Yes, but then do it. Harrison's tone left no room for argument. Vincent Delgado doesn't just steal wives, Miles. He steals lives. Research. Careers. Reputations. I'm not just protecting myself. I'm stopping a predator. Miles studied his friend. This isn't just about Bianca anymore, is it? It never was. She made her choice. Harrison checked his watch. I need to prepare for tonight. As evening approached, Harrison meticulously staged the house for Bianca's visit. Family photos remained prominently displayed. Financial documents were strategically placed in his study, including records of a loan payoff. A bottle of Bianca's favorite wine, a Barolo they discovered on their 5th anniversary, sat uncorked on the kitchen counter. At precisely 7 p.m., the doorbell rang. Bianca stood on the threshold, uncertainty in her normally confident posture. She dressed casually in jeans and a loose sweater, a calculated choice to appear accessible, unthreatening. Come in, Harrison said, stepping aside. She entered hesitantly, eyes darting to the visible security camera in the foyer. New security system? Recent events necessitated upgraded protection. He replied evenly. Why? She followed him to the kitchen, declining the offered glass. I can't. That's part of what I need to tell you. Harrison leaned against the counter, waiting. Bianca took a deep breath. I'm pregnant, Harrison. He allowed a flash of pain to cross his features, genuine, despite his foreknowledge. Vincent's. She nodded, having the grace to look uncomfortable. Yes. How long? About 8 weeks. Harrison calculated backward. So you conceived while we were still living together as husband and wife. Bianca flushed. Harrison, were you ever going to tell me? Or just let me discover it when you filed for divorce? I'm telling you now, she said defensively. And I wanted to explain about the loans. I never asked you to pay them off. No, Harrison agreed. You just planned your exit strategy around them being paid eventually. By me, working 60-hour weeks to support your career. That's not fair. None of this is fair, Bianca. He poured himself a glass of wine. So what happens now? You marry Vincent, have his child, build your specialized cardiac center with the Arlington Grant. Her eyes widened slightly. How do you know about the Arlington Grant? I know many things, Harrison replied, including that your relationship with Vincent began 18 months ago, not 6. That you've diverted almost $120,000 from our joint accounts. That Vincent has a pattern of using women for professional advancement before discarding them. Color drained from Bianca's face. Who have you been talking to? Does it matter? The truth is the truth. She recovered quickly, her chin lifting. Whatever you think you know, Vincent and I are building something real, professionally and personally. The Arlington Grant is just the beginning. And if you don't get it, we will. Her confidence seemed forced. Our proposal is revolutionary. Is it? Or is it largely built on research stolen from others, including Vincent's ex-wives? Bianca stared at him. You're trying to sabotage us. I'm seeking the truth, Harrison countered, and justice for everyone Vincent has used and discarded, including me. Her laugh held no humor. Let me guess. You think I'm just another victim who'll be thrown away when I'm no longer useful? Harrison studied her. Are you so certain you won't be? Something flickered in her eyes, doubt quickly suppressed. You don't know Vincent like I do. I know him through his pattern of behavior. 3 ex-wives, multiple stolen research projects, a history of professional and personal betrayal. Harrison set down his glass. But you're right about one thing, Bianca. I'm going to fight you, both of you. Not just for what's mine, but for what's right. Bianca's expression hardened. If you think you can intimidate me, this isn't intimidation. It's a promise. Harrison's voice remained calm. You and Vincent built your future on lies. To me, to your colleagues, to the medical community. That foundation won't hold. Is that a threat? It's a fact. Harrison moved toward the foyer, indicating their meeting was over. I suggest you consult with your attorney about full financial disclosure in divorce proceedings. Pennsylvania takes a dim view of hidden assets. Bianca gathered her composure. This pregnancy changes things, Harrison, legally and morally. It changes nothing about what you and Vincent did. Nothing about the lies, the theft, the betrayal. Harrison opened the front door. The child is innocent. You and Vincent are not. After she left, Harrison reviewed the recording. Every admission, every revelation, every defensive reaction, all documented for legal purposes. He sent the files to Denise with a brief message, moving forward as planned. Later that night, Harrison received a text from Miles. Meeting with Philip Arlington confirmed. 9 a.m. tomorrow. His office. The pieces continued to fall into place. Chapter 5. The Leverage. Philip Arlington's office occupied the top floor of a century-old building overlooking Rittenhouse Square. At 78, the philanthropist remained sharp and imposing, with piercing blue eyes that had evaluated thousands of funding proposals over decades. Mr. Flynn, he said, rising from behind an antique mahogany desk. My grandson speaks highly of you. Travis is a good man, Harrison replied, shaking his hand. I appreciate you making time for me. Miles Tanner mentioned potential fraud in our grant process. Arlington gestured to a chair. That's not an allegation I take lightly. Harrison placed a folder on the desk. What do you know about Vincent Delgado and Bianca Flynn's application for your cardiovascular research grant? Arlington frowned. They're finalists. Their proposed treatment center shows promising innovation for hereditary cardiac conditions. Innovation built on stolen research, Harrison said, opening the folder. Research taken from Vincent's previous wives and colleagues without attribution. For the next 30 minutes, Harrison presented the evidence he'd compiled, side-by-side comparisons of research papers showing clear plagiarism, testimony from Adriana and other researchers, documentation of Vincent's pattern of intellectual theft. Arlington's expression grew increasingly grave. These are serious allegations, Mr. Flynn. They're facts, Mr. Arlington. Verifiable facts that your grant committee should consider before awarding $15 million. I sense there's something personal in your pursuit of this, Arlington observed. Harrison didn't deny it. Bianca Flynn is my wife. She's been having an affair with Vincent Delgado for 18 months while I financed her career. She's now pregnant with his child and planning to divorce me. Arlington winced. I'm sorry. I'm not here for sympathy. I'm here because your foundation is about to reward scientific fraud and professional misconduct. Arlington studied him. What exactly do you want from me, Mr. Flynn? Due diligence, Harrison replied. A thorough investigation of their research claims before any grant is awarded. That's all. And if we find your allegations are substantiated, then you'll do what's right for medical science and your foundation's integrity. Arlington was silent for a moment. I'll need to bring in independent evaluators. This process could take weeks. The grant announcement is in 6 weeks. That should be sufficient. As Harrison stood to leave, Arlington asked, Does your wife know you're here? No, and I prefer it stays that way for now. Arlington nodded. Travis said you were meticulous and principled. I see he was right. From Arlington's office, Harrison went directly to Philadelphia General Hospital, where he'd arranged a meeting with Dr. Eleanor Rosenbaum, the outgoing chief of cardiology, the position Vincent coveted. Dr. Rosenbaum was a formidable woman in her late 60s, with a reputation for brilliance and uncompromising standards. Her office walls displayed decades of accomplishments, including pioneering work in pediatric cardiology. Mr. Flynn, she said, gesturing to a chair. How can the cardiology department help you today? I believe I can help you, Dr. Rosenbaum, Harrison replied. Specifically with your succession planning. Her eyebrows rose. An unusual topic for a non-medical professional. I have information concerning one of your candidates, Vincent Delgado, that directly impacts his suitability for your position. Dr. Rosenbaum's expression remained neutral, but her attention sharpened. Go on. Harrison presented a condensed version of his evidence, focusing on the professional misconduct aspects. Dr. Delgado has systematically appropriated research from colleagues and subordinates throughout his career. His current project with the Arlington Foundation is largely built on unattributed work from others. These are serious allegations. They're documented facts, Harrison corrected gently, which I'm providing to you confidentially as part of your due diligence process. Dr. Rosenbaum studied the materials. You realize this could derail his candidacy? I realize it should derail his candidacy, Harrison countered. Your department's reputation depends on ethical leadership. And your interest in this matter? Harrison maintained eye contact. Professional integrity in medicine matters to everyone, Dr. Rosenbaum, including investors like myself who fund medical research. She nodded slowly. I appreciate your civic-mindedness, Mr. Flynn. This information will be carefully considered. As Harrison left the hospital, his phone chimed with a text from Drew Boyd. Package delivered to Lawrence Whitfield's office per instructions. File opened 37 minutes ago. Harrison smiled slightly. The package was a comprehensive dossier of Bianca's financial misconduct, the diverted funds, the hidden accounts, the strategic timing of her divorce plans around Harrison paying off her loans. While attorney-client privilege would prevent Whitfield from sharing this with Harrison, ethics rules required him to counsel his client appropriately about financial disclosure requirements. In short, Bianca was about to receive a very uncomfortable conversation from her own attorney. That evening, Harrison met with Adriana Delgado again, this time at a private dining room in an upscale restaurant. She wasn't alone. 2 other women accompanied her. Catherine Marshall, Vincent's first wife, now a researcher at Johns Hopkins, and Teresa Alvarez, wife number 3, a neurologist whose innovative approaches Vincent had appropriated for his cardiac procedures. I told them about our conversation, Adriana explained. They want to help. The women shared their stories, remarkably similar patterns of professional and personal betrayal. Each had seen their work appear in Vincent's publications, their innovations integrated into his procedures, their contributions erased as he advanced. Why come forward now? Harrison asked. Why not before? Catherine, the eldest of the 3, spoke first. Medical politics, the old boys network, the fear of being labeled bitter ex-wives out for revenge. But together, with your resources and connections, Teresa added, we have strength in numbers. By the end of dinner, they had formed an alliance. For people connected by Vincent Delgado's betrayal, each bringing different resources to their cause. Catherine's academic standing. Teresa's detailed documentation of her stolen neurological innovations. Adriana's network within Philadelphia's medical community. Harrison's financial resources and strategic mind. The Arlington Foundation investigation is underway, Harrison informed them. And Dr. Rosenbaum is reassessing Vincent's candidacy for chief of cardiology. What about Bianca? Adriana asked. Where does she stand in all this? Harrison's expression remained neutral. She's made her choice. Now she'll face the consequences alongside Vincent. As the dinner concluded, Catherine lingered behind. There's something you should know, she said quietly. Something Adriana and Teresa don't know. Harrison waited. Vincent has a child, a daughter from a relationship before his first marriage. Catherine's voice dropped further. He's never acknowledged her, never paid support. The mother was a nurse who worked with him during his residency. Why tell me this? Because it shows who he truly is. Catherine met his gaze. And because your wife is carrying his child, she should know what kind of father he'll be. Harrison absorbed this new information. Do you have documentation? Catherine nodded. I'll send it to you. The mother's name is Natalie Perry. She lives in Baltimore now. Another piece of the puzzle fell into place. Not just Vincent's professional misconduct, but his personal failings as well. The next morning, Harrison received an unexpected call from Lawrence Whitfield, Bianca's attorney. Mr. Flynn, Whitfield began, his tone professionally cordial. I understand you're represented by Denise Montgomery. That's correct. I'd like to discuss the possibility of an early settlement conference. My client is open to reasonable negotiations. Harrison suppressed a smile. The financial documentation had clearly had its intended effect. I'll consult with Ms. Montgomery, but I'm not optimistic about early resolution, Harrison replied. Given the extensive financial misconduct we've documented. A pause. Perhaps we could discuss those allegations in a preliminary meeting? Perhaps. I'll have Ms. Montgomery contact her office. After ending the call, Harrison dialed Drew Boyd. I need information on Natalie Perry in Baltimore, he explained. Former nurse, has a child with Vincent Delgado from approximately 15 years ago. On it, Drew replied. Also, you should know, Bianca and Vincent had a very public argument at the hospital yesterday. Witnesses report it was about financial issues and promises not kept. The stress fractures were beginning to show. That afternoon, Denise called with an update. Whitfield is practically begging for a settlement conference. Whatever you send him has Bianca running scared. Schedule it for next week, Harrison directed. By then, we'll have even more leverage. Harrison, Denise said carefully, revenge is a powerful motivator, but it's a terrible negotiating position. Be clear about what you actually want from all this. Her words gave him pause. What did he want? Beyond the satisfaction of seeing Bianca and Vincent's carefully constructed plans collapse? Beyond justice for the women Vincent had used and discarded? I want what's mine, he said finally, and I want them to face the consequences of their actions, professionally, financially, and personally. That's not specific enough for a settlement position, Denise pressed. Harrison considered. I want full financial recovery of all diverted funds plus the loan repayment. I want the house and my personal investments protected. I want no ongoing financial connection to Bianca, no alimony, no support beyond what's legally required for the child, if it's mine. And if the child is Vincent's, as Bianca claims, then I want nothing to do with either of them, ever again. Denise sighed. I'll set up the meeting. But Harrison, be prepared for this to get uglier before it's over. Harrison hung up and walked to the window of his office, looking out over the Philadelphia skyline. In just a week, he'd transformed from betrayed husband to strategic adversary, systematically dismantling the future Bianca and Vincent had planned at his expense. The process was far from complete, but the foundation was crumbling beneath them. Soon, they would have nothing left to stand on. Chapter 6. The Confrontation. The settlement conference was scheduled for Wednesday morning at Denise Montgomery's office. By Monday, Harrison had received Drew Boyd's report on Natalie Perry, a pediatric nurse now working at Johns Hopkins Children's Center, raising a 14-year-old daughter named Olivia. DNA testing conducted during a child support case had confirmed Vincent's paternity, but he'd fought the support order with expensive attorneys until Natalie, financially drained, had accepted a minimal, one-time settlement with a non-disclosure agreement. She struggled financially, Drew reported, put herself through nurse practitioner school while raising her daughter alone. The girl is apparently brilliant. Early admission to a prestigious STEM program, perfect grades. Harrison made a decision. Contact Ms. Perry. Tell her I have information about Vincent Delgado that might be relevant to her situation. If she's willing to meet, I'll fly to Baltimore tomorrow. Tuesday morning found Harrison in a quiet cafe near Johns Hopkins, waiting for Natalie Perry. She arrived precisely on time. A slender woman with intelligent eyes and the efficient movements of someone who managed multiple responsibilities. "Mr. Flynn," she said, extending her hand. "Your investigator was quite mysterious about why you wanted to meet." "Thank you for making time," Harrison replied. "I understand you have a history with Vincent Delgado." Wariness immediately replaced curiosity in her expression. "That was a long time ago. Not for your daughter." Harrison kept his tone gentle. "Or for Vincent's pattern of behavior, which continues today." Slowly, carefully, Harrison explained his situation. His wife's affair with Vincent, the systematic betrayal, the pregnancy, and the broader pattern of Vincent using and discarding women while appropriating their professional work. Natalie listened without interruption, her expression shifting from caution to recognition to anger. "Why are you telling me this? What do you want from me?" "Information, transparency, perhaps cooperation." Harrison placed a folder on the table. "Vincent and my wife are planning a future together, professionally and personally, a future that includes a child. I believe they should do so with full awareness of who Vincent truly is. The non-disclosure agreement applies to the financial settlement, not to factual statements about Vincent's behavior as a father." Harrison tapped the folder. "This contains documentation of Vincent's pattern with his 3 ex-wives, plus your situation. Multiple abandoned women, stolen research, appropriated careers." Natalie studied him. "And what do you get out of exposing this?" "Justice," Harrison replied simply. "For everyone he's harmed, including your wife." Harrison's expression remained steady. She made her choice. She deserves to know exactly what she chose. Natalie was silent for a long moment. "Olivia has asked about her father for years. I've protected her from the truth, that he paid to erase his responsibility to her." "She deserves better," Harrison said quietly. "Yes, she does." Natalie took a deep breath. "What exactly are you proposing?" By the time Harrison left Baltimore, he had gained another ally in his campaign against Vincent Delgado, and another piece of the strategy falling into place. The settlement conference began the following morning with superficial cordiality that quickly evaporated. Bianca sat beside Lawrence Whitfield, her posture rigid, her expression a mixture of defiance and apprehension. Harrison and Denise Montgomery presented a united front of calm preparedness. "Before we begin," Denise said, placing a thick folder on the conference table, "we should establish the true parameters of this dissolution. My client has documented extensive financial misconduct by Mrs. Flynn, including diversion of marital assets in contemplation of divorce." Whitfield frowned. "We've reviewed those allegations and are prepared to address them." "They're not allegations," Harrison interjected. "They're documented facts. Just like the 18-month duration of my wife's affair, the strategic timing of her divorce plans around my loan repayment, and her current pregnancy by her paramour." Bianca flinched visibly at his clinical recitation. "Harrison, Mr. Flynn," Denise corrected, "will maintain professional distance in these proceedings." "This hostility is counterproductive," Whitfield said smoothly. "My client is prepared to make reasonable concessions regarding financial matters, given her changed circumstances." "Changed circumstances," Harrison repeated. "An interesting euphemism for systematic betrayal and fraud. Bianca's composure cracked. Is this what you want? To humiliate me? To punish me? What I want, Harrison replied evenly, is justice. Return of diverted funds. Reimbursement for the loan payoff you strategically manipulated. Division of assets that reflects your misconduct. And complete dissolution of our relationship. Financial, personal, and legal. And the child? Whitfield interjected. If paternity testing confirms it's mine, which seems unlikely given the timeline, I'll meet my legal obligations. Otherwise, that's between your client and Vincent Delgado. Harrison's gaze never left Bianca, a man she might want to investigate more thoroughly before tying her future to his. What does that mean? Bianca demanded. Harrison simply slid a folder across the table. Information your attorney should review with you privately. Whitfield opened the folder, scanning its contents with growing concern. He whispered something to Bianca, whose face paled. We'd like to request a brief recess, Whitfield said. Of course, Denise replied. Take all the time you need. As they left the conference room, Denise turned to Harrison. What did you give them? The truth about Vincent Delgado, Harrison replied. His abandoned child in Baltimore. His pattern with his 3 ex-wives. His history of professional theft and personal betrayal. You're not just negotiating a divorce settlement, Denise observed. You're dismantling her entire future plan. She dismantled our future, Harrison countered. Now she can face the reality of what she chose instead. When Bianca and Whitfield returned 30 minutes later, the change in Bianca was palpable. The defiance had drained from her posture, replaced by uncertainty. My client is prepared to address the financial issues directly, Whitfield began, his tone conciliatory. Full restitution of diverted funds, acknowledgement of the loan repayment as separate property, and an equitable division that reflects recent revelations. In the house, Denise asked, Mrs. Flynn will relinquish any claim to the marital residence. The negotiation proceeded efficiently after that, with Bianca making concession after concession. By late afternoon, they had a framework for settlement that heavily favored Harrison, a rare outcome for a husband in Pennsylvania divorce proceedings. As they prepared to conclude, Bianca asked for a moment alone with Harrison. Against Denise's advice, he agreed. When the attorney stepped out, Bianca faced him across the conference table. Is all this true? About Vincent? Every word. The child in Baltimore? DNA confirmed. He paid to make her disappear from his life. Bianca absorbed this. And his ex-wives? The stolen research. You've been integrated into an established pattern, Bianca. One that ends with you discarded once he's extracted everything useful from your career and connections. She studied him, searching for deception. Why are you doing this? Is destroying us professionally necessary for the divorce? This isn't about the divorce, Harrison replied honestly. It's about justice. For everyone Vincent has harmed. For every woman whose work he's stolen. For every child he's abandoned. Including me. Bianca's laugh held no humor. The next ex-wife in training. That's your choice now. You have information I didn't have. You could decide what to do with it. Bianca was silent for a long moment. The Arlington Grant investigation. The review of Vincent's candidacy for chief of cardiology. That's your doing too. Harrison didn't deny it. Actions have consequences, Bianca. For both of you. And there's no way to stop this? To mitigate what's coming? None. Harrison stood. You chose your path 18 months ago. Now you can walk it with open eyes. As he turned to leave, Bianca spoke again, her voice smaller. If I had known, if I had seen what Vincent truly was. Harrison paused at the door. You still wouldn't have chosen me. You would have chosen a different exit strategy. The truth of his words hung between them as he walked out. That evening, Harrison received a call from Philip Arlington. Our preliminary investigation confirms your allegations. The philanthropist said without preamble. The similarities between Delgado's research and his ex-wife's work are too substantial to be coincidental. And the Grant decision? The committee will be informed next week. I wanted you to know first as a courtesy. Thank you. Mr. Flynn, Arlington hesitated. This will have significant professional consequences for both Dr. Delgado and your wife. I'm aware. Justice is important, Arlington acknowledged. But so is mercy. Harrison considered this. Some betrayals go beyond forgiveness, Mr. Arlington. Some choices cannot be unmade. After hanging up, Harrison received a text from Drew Boyd. Vincent Delgado just emptied his primary bank account. Airline reservation to Zurich tomorrow morning. The final phase was unfolding faster than anticipated. Vincent, sensing the impending collapse of his professional facade, was preparing to flee, leaving Bianca to face the consequences alone. Harrison made one call to Natalie Perry in Baltimore. "Vincent is running," he said without preamble. "Tomorrow morning, Zurich flight." "Abandoning Bianca just like he abandoned me," Natalie observed. "Are you going to warn her?" Harrison considered the question. "No. She needs to see his true character for herself. And the child she's carrying will have a mother," Harrison replied, "which is more than Vincent provided for your daughter." The pieces were all in place now. The final act would play out without further intervention from Harrison. Vincent would flee. Bianca would be left alone to face the professional and personal fallout. Justice would be served, not by Harrison's hand directly, but by the inevitable consequences of their own actions. All that remained was to watch it unfold. Chapter 7. The Collapse. Dawn found Harrison at Philadelphia International Airport, observing from a discreet distance as Vincent Delgado checked in for his flight to Zurich. The doctor appeared harried, constantly checking his phone, his normally impeccable appearance slightly disheveled. Beside him sat a single suitcase, hardly the luggage of someone planning a brief trip. Harrison's phone vibrated with a text from Drew Boyd. Subject: checked 2 bags. Purchased one-way ticket with cash yesterday. No return flight. Vincent was indeed running, abandoning his position, his research, his future with Bianca, and his unborn child, just as he had abandoned Olivia 14 years earlier, just as he had discarded 3 wives when they no longer served his purposes. Harrison watched until Vincent passed through security, then dialed Adriana Delgado. "He's leaving. Zurich flight one way." "Coward," she replied, unsurprised. "Did he contact Bianca?" "Not according to our surveillance. So he's abandoning her completely." With the Arlington Grant investigation underway and his chief of cardiology candidacy in jeopardy, Adriana's voice held grim satisfaction. "History repeats itself. The press conference is still scheduled for tomorrow." "Yes. Catherine, Teresa, and I will present our documentation to the Medical Ethics Board. Philadelphia General has agreed to a formal investigation into research misconduct." Harrison ended the call and drove directly to his meeting with Dr. Rosenbaum at Philadelphia General. "Vincent Delgado left the country this morning," he informed her. "One-way ticket to Zurich." The chief of cardiology's expression hardened. "Without notice or resignation. Abandoning patients and responsibilities, and leaving my wife to face the consequences of their joint professional misconduct." Harrison placed a folder on her desk. The complete documentation, including his unauthorized use of research from 3 former wives, plus plagiarized material in his Arlington Foundation grant application. Dr. Rosenbaum studied the materials. "This will devastate his career, and potentially your wife's as well." "Consequences come from choices," Harrison replied. "Bianca chose to align herself professionally and personally with a man who systematically exploits others. And you chose to expose it all." Dr. Rosenbaum studied him. "Revenge is rarely as satisfying as anticipated, Mr. Flynn." "This isn't about satisfaction," Harrison countered. "It's about truth, about integrity in medical research, about patterns of behavior that harm patients, colleagues, and families." She nodded slowly. "The hospital will issue a statement this afternoon regarding Dr. Delgado's unauthorized departure and pending ethics investigation." By noon, Harrison had confirmation that Vincent hadn't contacted Bianca before fleeing, leaving her to discover his abandonment alongside everyone else when Philadelphia General released its statement. At 2:07 p.m., Bianca called him. Harrison let it go to voicemail. The message was brief and raw. "He's gone. Did you know? Did you drive him away?" Harrison didn't respond. This moment of revelation of Bianca finally seeing Vincent's true character needed to unfold without his interference. That evening, as Harrison worked in his study, his security system alerted him to movement on the front porch. The camera showed Bianca, pale and clearly distraught, leaning against the doorframe as if her legs might give way. He hesitated, then went to the door. "He left," she said without preamble, without a word, without a warning. "I know. Did you cause this?" Her eyes, red-rimmed from crying, searched his face. "Did you force him to run?" "I exposed the truth," Harrison replied. His response was his choice. Bianca swayed slightly. "May I come in, please? I don't know where else to go." Against his better judgment, Harrison stepped aside. Bianca moved past him into the foyer, her familiar perfume, jasmine and vanilla, triggering unwanted memories of happier times. "The hospital suspended me," she said, her voice hollow, "pending investigation into research misconduct. My partnership at Phoenix Medical is frozen. The Arlington grant." She shook her head. "Everything's collapsing. Actions have consequences." "I didn't know," Bianca insisted, "about the stolen research, about his pattern with ex-wives. I believed in our work together." "You knew about betraying our marriage," Harrison countered, "about diverting our joint funds, about strategically timing your exit after I paid your loans." She didn't deny it. "I was unhappy. Had been for years. You never gave me the chance to fix it. Would you have?" She looked up at him. "Or would you have just worked harder, sacrificed more, try to buy my happiness like you bought everything else?" The accusation stung because it held a kernel of truth. Harrison had approached their marriage like every other challenge in his life, as a problem to solve, a goal to achieve through determination and resources. "We'll never know," he said finally. "You made that choice for both of us when you turned to Vincent." Bianca moved to the living room, automatically heading toward her favorite chair before catching herself. "What happens now with a divorce?" "The settlement terms are clear. You return the diverted funds. I keep the house and my personal investments. You keep your practice, what's left of it. And after that," Harrison studied her, "after that, our lives are separate. You deal with the consequences of your choices without me." "Even with the baby?" "Especially with the baby," Harrison replied evenly. "Vincent's child is not my responsibility." Bianca's hand moved protectively to her abdomen. "And if it's yours?" The question hung between them. Despite Bianca's claim that the child was Vincent's, the timeline made it possible, barely, that Harrison was the father. "If paternity testing confirms it's mine, I'll meet my obligations." "Financial obligations," Bianca clarified, "not emotional ones. You chose to end our family, Bianca. Don't expect me to build a new one from its ashes." She nodded slowly, accepting this reality. "I should go." "Where?" "Lydia's, I guess. At least for tonight." As she moved toward the door, Bianca paused. "Was this your plan all along? To dismantle everything? To leave me with nothing?" "My plan was to seek justice," Harrison replied. "For myself and for others Vincent harmed. What's happening now is the natural consequence of choices you both made." After she left, Harrison poured himself a scotch and considered the day's developments. Vincent's flight, Philadelphia General's ethics investigation, Bianca's professional suspension, the imminent collapse of their Arlington grant application. Justice was unfolding exactly as he'd orchestrated. Yet the satisfaction he'd anticipated felt hollow, tinged with an awareness of the human cost. Not just to Bianca and Vincent, who deserved their fate, but to patients who might have benefited from legitimate research, to colleagues caught in the crossfire, to an unborn child who would enter a world of complicated recriminations. Harrison pushed these thoughts aside. Mercy had no place in his calculations now. The path was set, and he would see it through to its conclusion. The following morning brought the press conference Adriana had organized. Harrison watched the live stream as Catherine Marshall, Teresa Alvarez, and Adriana Delgado presented their evidence of Vincent's systematic appropriation of their research. They were joined, unexpectedly, by Natalie Perry, who described Vincent's abandonment of their daughter. The medical community reacted with shock and swift condemnation. By afternoon, Philadelphia General had announced a formal ethics investigation, and the Arlington Foundation had publicly withdrawn Vincent and Bianca's grant application from consideration. Harrison's phone rang. Philip Arlington. The press conference was quite damning, the philanthropist observed. The truth often is. Indeed. Arlington paused. Have you spoken with your wife since Vincent's departure? Briefly. And Harrison considered his response. She made her choices. Now she faces their consequences. Alone, Arlington noted. As we all do, ultimately. That evening, Harrison received a call from an unexpected source, Dr. Rosenbaum. I thought you should know, she began without preamble. Your wife collapsed at the hospital this afternoon. She's been admitted for observation. Harrison's grip on the phone tightened. What happened? Stress-induced complications. The pregnancy may be at risk. I see. Harrison struggled to maintain his detached demeanor. Thank you for informing me. Will you come? She is no one else. Her sister is out of town, and her parents are in Italy. The question caught him off guard. His carefully constructed vengeance hadn't accounted for this scenario. Bianca truly alone, vulnerable, her health, and her unborn child at risk. For a moment, old protective instinct stirred. No, he said finally. Our relationship is over. Her current situation doesn't change that. Dr. Rosenbaum's disapproval was palpable even through the phone. Revenge is a powerful motivator, Mr. Flynn, but it rarely brings peace. After hanging up, Harrison paced his study, battling unwanted concern for Bianca. He'd achieved exactly what he'd set out to do. Expose Vincent's misconduct, force him to reveal his true character by abandoning Bianca, dismantle their professional ambitions built on lies and stolen work. So why did victory taste so bitter? His phone chimed with a text from Adriana, Vincent spotted in Geneva, apparently meeting with pharmaceutical representatives, still abandoning his responsibilities. The confirmation of Vincent's continued selfishness should have reinforced Harrison's resolve. Instead, it highlighted the asymmetry of consequences. Vincent free to start over elsewhere, while Bianca faced professional ruin and potential health complications alone. Harrison shook his head, dispelling unwanted sympathy. Bianca had made her choices. She betrayed their marriage, diverted their funds, aligned herself with Vincent personally and professionally. Her current isolation was the natural result of those decisions. Yet as night fell, Harrison found himself driving to Philadelphia General, drawn by forces he couldn't entirely explain or resist. Chapter 8. The Revelation. Philadelphia General's maternity ward was quiet at 10 p.m. when Harrison arrived. He identified himself at the nurse's station, where a night shift supervisor regarded him with cautious sympathy. Mr. Flynn, Dr. Rosenbaum mentioned you might come. She consulted her computer. Your wife is in room 418. Her condition has stabilized, but she's under observation for the next 24 hours. Harrison nodded. What exactly happened? Elevated blood pressure, signs of potential placental complications. The nurse's expression softened. Stress can be particularly dangerous during pregnancy, especially in the first trimester. Harrison absorbed this information silently, then made his way to room 418. He paused outside, uncertainty gripping him. What was he doing here? His plan didn't include compassion for Bianca. She'd forfeited any claim to his concern months ago. Yet he found himself pushing open the door. The room was dimly lit, monitors beeping softly beside the bed where Bianca lay asleep, and 4-line in her arm, her face pale against the white pillowcase. She looked smaller somehow, vulnerable in a way that stirred unwanted protective instincts. Harrison stood at the foot of her bed, watching her chest rise and fall with each breath, contemplating the strange turns that had brought them to this moment. 8 years of marriage, 18 months of betrayal, a week of calculated vengeance, and now this. Bianca alone and unwell, carrying a child whose paternity remained uncertain, her professional future in ruins. As if sensing his presence, Bianca's eyes fluttered open. For a moment, confusion clouded her features, then recognition dawned. Harrison, her voice was raspy from sleep. Why are you here? A question he was asking himself. Dr. Rosenbaum called me. Bianca struggled to sit up, wincing slightly. You didn't have to come. I know. Silence stretched between them, filled with unasked questions and unspoken accusations. The baby, Harrison finally asked. Stable for now. Bianca's hand moved protectively to her abdomen. The doctors are concerned about stress-related complications. Harrison nodded, unsure what to say next. His carefully constructed revenge narrative hadn't prepared him for this moment. Standing in a hospital room with the wife who had betrayed him, feeling something other than cold satisfaction at her downfall. Vincent contacted me, Bianca said suddenly, her voice flat. From Switzerland. He suggested I join him there once things settle down. Will you? She laughed bitterly. After he abandoned me, to face everything alone? After I've lost my partnership, my research credibility, my professional standing? She shook her head. I'm many things, Harrison, but I'm not a fool. Not anymore. What will you do? I don't know. The admission seemed to cost her. My career here is effectively over. The medical community doesn't forgive research misconduct, even by association. Harrison moved to the window, looking out at the Philadelphia skyline illuminated against the night sky. You could start over somewhere else. With what? My reputation is destroyed. My savings are gone. Most went to the attorney and living expenses after I moved out. Bianca's voice caught, and in a few months, I'll have a child to support. Harrison turned back to her. Is it Vincent's? The directness of the question seemed to surprise her. I don't know, she admitted after a long pause. I told you it was because it was easier, because I thought Vincent and I would build a future together. A bitter smile touched her lips. So much for that. The possibility that the child might be his shifted something in Harrison's chest. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but a complication in his narrative of clean, complete separation. We should do a paternity test, he said, his tone neutral, when it's medically appropriate. Bianca studied him. Would it matter to you if the child is yours? Yes. The answer came without hesitation. Not for us. There is no us anymore. But for the child. She nodded slowly. I'm sorry, Harrison. Not just for the affair or the divorce, but for how I handled it all. For the person I became. Why? The question that had haunted him for days finally emerged. Why Vincent? Why throw away everything we built? Bianca was quiet for a long moment. It wasn't sudden. It was 1,000 small moments of disconnect. You building a life I never fully wanted, assuming my ambitions match yours. Me resenting your sacrifices instead of appreciating them because they made me feel obligated. Both of us going through the motions of marriage without really seeing each other. You could have talked to me, Harrison said, an edge entering his voice, instead of orchestrating an 18-month exit strategy. I should have, she acknowledged. But Vincent made me feel understood in ways you never did. He seemed to want what I wanted, professional recognition, research breakthroughs, no pressure for children or suburban domesticity. And now I see it was all manipulation. He wanted my research credentials, my connections at Phoenix Medical, my potential to advance his career. Bianca's eyes filled with tears. I traded authentic support for skillful exploitation. Quite a bargain. Harrison remained silent, processing her words. The woman before him was neither the beloved wife of his memory nor the cold betrayer of recent weeks, but something more complicated, flawed, selfish, yet capable of self-awareness and regret. I should go, he said finally. The nurse said you need rest. Bianca nodded. Thank you for coming. You didn't have to. At the door, Harrison paused. I'll have Denise amend the settlement agreement to include reasonable support during your transition, regardless of the paternity results. Surprise flickered across Bianca's face. Why would you do that? Not for you, Harrison clarified. For the child. And for myself, so I can finally close this chapter knowing I maintain my own principles, whatever choices others made. Before she could respond, he left, the door closing quietly behind him. In the hospital parking lot, Harrison sat in his car, emotions warring within him. His revenge had succeeded beyond expectations. Vincent exposed and fleeing, Bianca professionally ruined, their future plans demolished. Yet victory felt hollow, tainted by the human complexity he'd tried to reduce to a simple narrative of betrayal and justice. His phone chimed with a text from Miles, checking in. "You okay?" Harrison considered the question. Was he okay? His marriage was over. His trust in relationships profoundly damaged. His carefully constructed life plan derailed. Yet beneath the wreckage, something else was emerging, a clearer understanding of himself, of his own role in the failure of his marriage, of the difference between justice and vengeance. Getting there, he replied honestly. The following morning, Harrison met with Denise to amend the settlement agreement. "I want to provide transitional support for 6 months," he explained. "Enough for Bianca to relocate and establish herself professionally elsewhere. And a separate trust for the child, pending paternity confirmation." Denise studied him. "This is a significant shift from your position last week. The circumstances have changed. Have they? Or has your perspective?" Harrison didn't answer directly. "Can you draft the amendments today?" "Of course." Denise hesitated. "Harrison, compassion isn't weakness. It's strength." "This isn't compassion," he corrected. "It's pragmatism. A clean, final resolution that prevents future complications." Denise clearly didn't believe him, but nodded. "I'll have the documents ready by this afternoon." From Denise's office, Harrison went to Philadelphia General for a scheduled meeting with Dr. Rosenbaum. The chief of cardiology greeted him with measured respect. "I understand you visited your wife last night." Harrison nodded. "Briefly. Her condition has improved. We'll likely release her tomorrow with restrictions on physical activity and stress." Dr. Rosenbaum studied him. "I've been in medicine 40 years, Mr. Flynn. Seen thousands of relationships navigate crisis. Revenge rarely leads to healing." "I'm not seeking healing," Harrison replied. "Just resolution." "Are you?" She raised an eyebrow. "Then why amend your settlement to provide support? Why visit the hospital last night?" Harrison didn't have a ready answer. Philadelphia General's Ethics Committee meets next week regarding the research misconduct allegations. Dr. Rosenbaum continued. "I've reviewed the evidence thoroughly. It's clear Vincent Delgado systematically appropriated others' work. It's less clear how much your wife knew or participated. Does it matter? She aligned herself with him professionally. Intent always matters in ethics violations." Dr. Rosenbaum leaned forward. "If your wife was manipulated rather than complicit, her professional future might be salvageable. Not here, perhaps, but elsewhere." Harrison absorbed this. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because despite your calculated vengeance, you still care what happens to her." Dr. Rosenbaum's assessment was direct. "And because justice requires truth, not assumptions." The conversation left Harrison unsettled. He constructed a narrative of Bianca's willing complicity in Vincent's professional misconduct. But what if the reality was more nuanced? What if she, like Vincent's ex-wives, had been manipulated professionally as well as personally? These questions accompanied him as he drove to Boyd Investigations for a final update. Drew Boyd greeted him with his usual efficiency. Vincent Delgado's pharmaceutical meetings in Geneva fell through. Seems his research credibility is now questionable internationally. He's moved on to Munich, apparently seeking academic appointments. And Bianca's financial situation? Precarious, Drew confirmed. Her position at Phoenix Medical is suspended without pay pending the ethics investigation. Her savings are minimal. The diverted funds she returned to you represented most of her liquid assets. Harrison nodded. Any contact between them since his departure? One video call, day before yesterday, lasted 12 minutes. Our sources indicate it ended with Bianca terminating the call after Vincent suggested she use her connection to you to smooth things over professionally. The final piece of clarity, Vincent abandoning Bianca while still trying to exploit her, even from across the ocean. That evening, Harrison received a call from Natalie Perry. "I wanted to thank you," she said without preamble, "for helping expose the truth about Vincent. How is Olivia handling the publicity?" "Better than I expected. She's always known her father didn't want her. Now, she understands it wasn't about her. It was about him and his pattern of behavior. That's a mature perspective." She's a remarkable young woman. Pride colored Natalie's voice. She asked me to thank you, too, for standing up for us when no one else would. After the call, Harrison sat in his study, contemplating the unlikely alliances his revenge had created, with Vincent's ex-wives, with Natalie and her daughter, with medical authorities and ethics committees. The mission he'd undertaken alone had become something larger, a collective reckoning with patterns of betrayal and exploitation that extended far beyond his marriage. Perhaps that was justice after all, not just personal vengeance, but systemic correction. The next morning, Harrison received a text from an unknown number. "It's Bianca. Being discharged today. Can we talk? In person?" He hesitated, unsure if further conversation served any purpose. Their marriage was over. The divorce settlement nearly finalized. Justice for Vincent's misconduct in progress. What remained to discuss? Yet he found himself replying, "My house. 7 p.m. At precisely 7, Bianca arrived, looking pale but composed. She'd changed from hospital attire to simple jeans and a loose sweater that didn't quite conceal the slight rounding of her abdomen. "Thank you for seeing me," she said as Harrison led her to the living room. Once their shared space, now irrevocably his. "What did you want to discuss?" Bianca took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about what happens next. For me, for the baby." She met his gaze directly. "I'm leaving Philadelphia. There's nothing for me here anymore." "Where will you go?" "Boston, maybe, or Chicago. Somewhere I can restart my career in a less specialized role." Her hands fidgeted in her lap. "The ethics committee interviewed me yesterday. They believe I was manipulated rather than complicit in Vincent's research misconduct. It won't save my position here, but it leaves the door open for a fresh start elsewhere." Harrison nodded. "That's good. For you and the child. I also received the amended settlement agreement." Bianca's voice softened. "The transitional support. The trust for the baby." "Why, Harrison? After everything." "It's the right thing to do," he said simply. "For the child, if it's mine. And for final resolution between us, regardless." Bianca studied him. "You've changed." "Have I?" The Harrison I married would have calculated the minimum legal obligation and fulfilled it precisely. No more, no less. The observation stung with its accuracy. Perhaps we all change when our foundations are shaken. Perhaps. Bianca hesitated. "There's something else." The doctor suggested an amniocentesis to monitor the baby's development, given the complications. It can also determine paternity definitively. Harrison absorbed this. "When?" "Next week." She met his gaze. Would you want to know the results?" "Yes." The answer came without hesitation. Regardless of what they show. They sat in silence for a moment, the remnants of their shared life surrounding them. Wedding photos still on the mantel, art they'd chosen together on the walls, furniture selected during happier times. All artifacts of a relationship that no longer existed. "I'm sorry, Harrison," Bianca said finally. "Not just for the affair or the financial deception, but for failing to see you clearly. For assuming you could never understand my ambitions or my fears. And I'm sorry for assuming I knew what you wanted without truly asking." The admission surprised him with its authenticity. "For believing I could build happiness for you instead of with you." It wasn't forgiveness. The betrayal cut too deep for that, but it was something else. Recognition. Acknowledgement of the complex human reality beneath the simplified narrative of victim and villain he'd constructed. "The paternity results won't change the divorce," Harrison said, needing clarity. "That path is set." "I know," Bianca nodded. "But they might change what comes after. What kind of relationship you have with the child, if it's yours. What kind of relationship we have as co-parents, if that's our future." Harrison hadn't allowed himself to consider these possibilities, too focused on severance and conclusion. Yet they existed, a complex matrix of potential futures extending from the wreckage of their marriage. "One step at a time," he said finally. "Test results first, then decisions." As Bianca prepared to leave, she paused at the door. "For what it's worth, I did love you, Harrison. Not always well, not always honestly, but I did." Harrison met her gaze. "I loved you too, but love without trust is just sentiment. And trust, once broken, is nearly impossible to rebuild. Nearly impossible, she echoed. But not entirely. After she left, Harrison stood in the foyer, contemplating her parting words. Not an overture to reconciliation. They were both realistic enough to know that door had closed, but perhaps an opening to something else. A post-marriage relationship defined not by bitterness and recrimination, but by careful respect and the needs of a child who might be his. His phone chimed with a text from Denise, settlement signed and filed. Divorce proceedings on schedule. You're officially in the home stretch. The notification should have brought satisfaction, finality. Instead, it felt like a milestone rather than a conclusion. One chapter ending, another yet to be written. Chapter 9. The Resolution. 6 days later, Harrison sat in a small waiting room at Pennsylvania Hospital's prenatal center while Bianca underwent the amniocentesis procedure. His presence wasn't required. This moment of medical intervention and genetic revelation was technically Bianca's alone. Yet here he was by invitation and by choice. Mr. Flynn, a nurse appeared in the doorway. Your wife is asking for you. Ex-wife, Harrison corrected automatically. The divorce is finalized. The nurse's expression remained professionally neutral. Of course. She's in recovery room 3. Bianca looked smaller against the medical machinery, a protective hand resting on her abdomen. Her eyes, when they met his, held uncertainty rather than their usual confidence. The procedure went well, she said as he entered. Results in 3 to 5 days. Harrison nodded, taking the chair beside her bed. How are you feeling? Physically? Sort of fine. Emotionally? She attempted a smile. That's more complicated. They sat in silence for a moment. These two people who had loved and betrayed and hurt each other, now united only by lingering legal matters and possibly shared genetic material in the child Bianca carried. I received 3 job offers, Bianca said finally. All in Boston. Research positions without patient care responsibilities, at least initially. The ethics committee's report helped. They concluded I was manipulated rather than complicit. When would you start? January. Enough time to relocate, settle in, prepare for the baby. She studied him. What about you? Harrison hadn't considered his own future beyond the divorce and his campaign against Vincent. Continue at Meridian Capital, I suppose. Resume the life I had before, everything. Can you? Bianca's question was gentle. Go back to who you were before. He considered this. No, that version of me died the night I overheard your phone call. I'm sorry. Don't be. Maybe he needed to die. Harrison surprised himself with the thought. Maybe the man who replaced him sees more clearly. A week later, Harrison was working in his study when his phone rang. Bianca. The results are in, she said without preamble, her voice carefully controlled. Can you meet me? To discuss them in person? They arranged to meet at a neutral location, a quiet cafe midway between his house and her temporary apartment. Harrison arrived first, claiming a corner table that offered privacy for what would inevitably be an emotional conversation. Bianca arrived precisely on time, her expression giving nothing away as she slid into the chair opposite him. Thank you for coming, she began, hands wrapped around her coffee cup. I wanted to do this face to face. Harrison nodded, waiting. The amniocentesis confirmed the baby is healthy. No genetic abnormalities. Bianca took a deep breath, and it confirmed paternity as well. The moment stretched between them, laden with implications. The baby is yours, Harrison. Her voice softened. Our child, not Vincent's. The revelation landed like a physical impact. Not entirely unexpected given the timeline, yet still profound in its consequences. The child conceived in the last weeks of their marriage, before Harrison discovered Bianca's betrayal, before vengeance and divorce, before everything collapsed. You're certain? He asked, his voice carefully neutral. Bianca nodded. The genetic testing is definitive. I have the documentation for your attorneys. Harrison absorbed this, emotions churning beneath his composed exterior. Not just theoretical responsibility now, but biological reality. His child, his future connection to Bianca, inescapable and permanent. What happens now? He asked. That depends on you. Bianca met his gaze directly. Legally, you have rights and responsibilities as the father. Emotionally and practically, that's more complicated. Do you want me involved? Beyond financial support, the question seemed to surprise her. Of course I do. You'll be a wonderful father, Harrison. Your capacity for loyalty, for protection, for careful planning. These are qualities our child deserves to know firsthand. Even after everything between us. Especially after everything. Bianca's hands tightened around her cup. You showed me who you truly are these past weeks. Not just the vengeful strategist dismantling my future with Vincent, but the man who still came to the hospital when I was ill, who amended the divorce settlement to provide transition support, who offered a trust fund for a child you weren't sure was yours. Harrison hadn't considered his actions in that light, as revelation rather than contradiction. I'm moving to Boston next month, Bianca continued, taking the research position at Massachusetts General. I'd like to propose a co-parenting arrangement that allows you regular involvement without disrupting either of our lives unnecessarily. You've thought this through. I've had time to consider all possible outcomes. A small smile touched her lips. A trait I learned from you, actually. Over the next hour, they outlined a preliminary framework. Regular visits, shared decision-making on major issues, financial arrangements beyond the trust fund already established. Not the family they'd once planned, but something intentional and focused on the child's well-being. As their meeting concluded, Bianca hesitated. There's one more thing. Vincent contacted me again yesterday. Harrison's expression darkened. What did he want? To reconcile. To start fresh now that the misunderstanding about his research has blown over. Her laugh held no humor, as if the destruction of my career and reputation was a minor inconvenience. What did you tell him? That I've seen his pattern clearly now. That I won't be wife number 4 on his list of discarded women. Bianca's expression hardened, and that if he contacts me again, I'll provide additional documentation to the ethics investigations already underway in 3 countries. Harrison nodded approvingly. He won't stop trying. Men like Vincent don't accept rejection easily. I know, but I'm stronger now. She met his gaze. Another unexpected outcome of all this. I found clarity I didn't have before. About who I am, what I want, what I'll accept in my life. As they prepared to leave, Bianca asked unexpectedly, "Do you regret it? Your campaign against Vincent and me?" Harrison considered the question carefully. I regret the necessity, perhaps, but not the action itself. Truth matters, Bianca. Consequences matter, even when they're painful, especially then. In the weeks that followed, Harrison and Bianca established their new dynamic. Not friendship, not reconciliation, but a carefully structured relationship focused on their shared responsibility for the life Bianca carried. Weekly meetings to discuss preparations. Medical appointments where Harrison attended as the father, sitting quietly in the corner as the ultrasound revealed their daughter's developing features. News from other fronts arrived regularly. Vincent Delgado, unable to secure positions in Europe due to expanding ethics investigations, had retreated to South America, where medical institutions were beginning to question his credentials as well. Adriana, Catherine, and Teresa had formed an advocacy group for research integrity, sharing their experiences to help others identify and address professional misconduct. Natalie and Olivia Perry had established communication with Adriana's group, creating unexpected connections between Vincent's abandoned responsibilities. 2 months after receiving the paternity results, Harrison stood in what would become his daughter's nursery in his Philadelphia home, a room he designed for weekend visits and shared custody arrangements. The walls were painted a soft sea green, furniture assembled with his characteristic precision, a collection of children's books already filling the shelves. Miles found him there one evening, contemplating the completed space. "Never thought I'd see this," his friend commented, leaning against the doorframe. "You building a nursery alone, co-parenting with your ex-wife, planning weekends and holidays around custody schedules. Life rarely follows our careful plans," Harrison replied. "No regrets." Harrison considered the question. About exposing Vincent? None. About the divorce? It was necessary, given the circumstances. But but I've learned something about justice versus vengeance, about the difference between punishing betrayal and dismantling a person's entire existence. Harrison moved to the window, looking out at the autumn leaves falling in his backyard. Bianca is paying for her choices, professionally, personally. That's justice. But she's also rebuilding, starting over. That's necessary. And Vincent is experiencing the natural consequences of lifetime patterns. His professional misconduct exposed. His abandonment of responsibilities revealed. His manipulations unsuccessful. Harrison's expression hardened slightly. That's not vengeance. That's accountability. Miles studied his friend. You've changed, Harrison. The man I knew 6 months ago wouldn't make these distinctions. The man I was 6 months ago believed in black and white narratives. Loyalty versus betrayal. Right versus wrong. Harrison turned from the window. Reality is more complicated. The following weekend, Harrison drove to Boston to help Bianca settle into her new apartment. Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Knock at Dawn. The digital clock on my nightstand glowed 2:17 a.m. when the desperate knocking shattered the silence of our suburban home. I bolted upright, instantly alert. 20 years in the military had trained that in my bones. Beside me, my wife Cheryl Merritt stirred, her blonde hair catching the moonlight streaming through our bedroom window. "James, what is that?" she whispered, her voice tight with what I initially mistook for concern. The knocking came again, more frantic this time. Small fists pounding against wood with the desperation of someone running from death itself. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, my bare feet hitting the cold hardwood floor. "Uncle James! Uncle James, please!" The voice froze my blood. Kelly, my 7-year-old niece, my brother Doug Crawford's youngest daughter. What the hell was she doing here at this hour? Doug lived 40 minutes away in the suburbs, and Kelly should have been safe in her bed. I rushed down the stairs, taking them 3 at a time, my heart hammering against my ribs. Through the frosted glass of our front door, I could make out a small silhouette, trembling, desperate. "Don't let her in." Cheryl's voice cut through the air like a blade, sharp and commanding. She had followed me downstairs, now standing at the bottom of the staircase in her silk nightgown. "Call the police, James. Call them now." I spun around to face her, confusion and anger warring in my chest. "What the hell are you talking about?" "That's Kelly. I said call the police." Her green eyes were wide, but not with fear, with something else. Something that made my stomach clench. "Don't open that door." The knocking had stopped. Through the glass, I could see Kelly had collapsed against our door, her small body shaking. Her purple pajamas, the ones with unicorns that she'd worn to our last family barbecue, were torn at the shoulder and dirty. Her feet were bare, pale against the dark porch. My hand shook as I pulled out my phone, not because I was afraid, but because something in my wife's voice, in her eyes, told me this night was about to change everything. I dialed 911, never taking my eyes off Cheryl's face. 911, what's your emergency? This is James Graham at 1247 Maple Street. My 7-year-old niece just showed up at my door in the middle of the night. She appears to be in distress. Her clothes are torn, and she's barefoot. "Sir, are you able to safely bring the child inside?" I looked at Cheryl, who was shaking her head violently. "My wife is concerned about letting her in. I'm not sure what's happening here. Officers are being dispatched to your location. Please remain on the line." Within minutes, the quiet suburban street erupted into chaos. Red and blue lights painted our neighbors' houses in alternating colors as 3 squad cars screamed to a halt in front of our home. But instead of simply approaching the door, the officers began setting up a perimeter around our house. I watched through our living room window as Officer Thomas O'Brien, whom I recognized from community events, spoke rapidly into his radio. More cars arrived, unmarked vehicles with grim-faced detectives, a black SUV that had federal plates. "What the fuck is going on here?" I demanded, turning to face Cheryl. She was backing away from me, her face pale as alabaster. "James, I can explain." "Explain what? Why did you tell me not to help my niece?" Why are the police treating our house like a crime scene? Before she could answer, a bullhorn crackled to life outside. James Graham, this is Detective Nelson Riley with the State Police. We need you to come outside with your hands visible. Do not bring anyone else with you. My military training kicked in. I assessed the situation with cold clarity. My niece was in danger, my wife was acting suspiciously, and law enforcement was treating me as either a victim or a suspect. I needed information, and I needed it fast. I opened the door slowly, my hands raised. Kelly was no longer on the porch. Paramedics were loading her into an ambulance, her small face barely visible under an oxygen mask. Relief flooded through me that she was getting help. Mr. Graham, Detective Riley approached, his hand resting on his weapon but not drawn. He was a tall man with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. We need to talk. About what? What's happened to my niece? Sir, we received a call approximately 30 minutes ago from your niece. She managed to contact emergency services from a location about 2 miles from here. She told the dispatcher that men were coming to hurt her Uncle James and that her Aunt Cheryl had told them where to find you. The words hit me like a physical blow. I turned to look back at my house, where Cheryl stood framed in the doorway, her silhouette dark against the warm interior light. She said that Aunt Cheryl was with a man she didn't recognize, and they were planning something bad. The child was hiding in what appears to be an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. She managed to escape when they were distracted. My mind raced, connecting dots I didn't want to see. Are you saying my wife is involved in a plot against me? Detective Riley's expression was grim. Mr. Graham, we found evidence at the warehouse that suggests someone was planning to stage your death to look like a suicide. We also found financial documents, life insurance policies, and what appears to be a detailed plan of your daily routine. I felt the world tilt on its axis. 23 years of marriage. 23 years of what I thought was love, loyalty, and partnership. I thought of all the times Cheryl had encouraged me to update my life insurance, to add her as the sole beneficiary of my military pension. The man with your wife, Detective Riley continued, we believe it's Herbert Vaughn. Do you know that name? I did. Herbert Vaughn was Cheryl's yoga instructor, a smooth-talking, pretty boy about 15 years younger than me. I'd met him at a few social events, had even shaken his hand while he smiled at me with perfect white teeth. The son of a bitch had been planning my murder while drinking my beer at my own barbecues. Mr. Graham, we're going to need you to come with us for your protection while we sort this out. Your wife is being taken into custody. I watched as officers moved toward my house. Through the window, I could see Cheryl being read her rights, her face a mask of defiance rather than remorse. She looked directly at me as they cuffed her, and for just a moment, I saw the woman she really was: cold, calculating, and utterly without conscience. As they loaded her into the back of a squad car, she turned her head and mouthed something at me. It took me a moment to realize what she was saying. You should have died. That's when I knew that James Graham, the man who had loved and trusted Cheryl Merritt, was dead. What remained was someone much more dangerous, someone who understood that mercy was a luxury he could no longer afford. Chapter 2. Uncovering the Web. The state police station smelled like burnt coffee and industrial disinfectant. I sat in an interview room that had seen too many broken lives, staring at a manila folder that contained the remains of my marriage. Detective Riley sat across from me, his weathered hands folded over evidence that painted my wife as a stranger. Your niece is stable, he began, sliding a cup of coffee toward me. Physically, she's unharmed. Emotionally, well, that's going to take time. She's a brave kid, Mr. Graham. Without her escape and call, you'd probably be dead by morning. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. Kelly had saved my life by risking her own. That debt could never be repaid, but it sure as hell would be honored. Tell me about the plan. I finally managed. Riley opened the folder, revealing photographs of the warehouse where Kelly had been held. It was one of several abandoned buildings on the outskirts of town, a relic from when our area had been more industrial. The photos showed a disturbing level of preparation, detailed maps of my daily routine, photos of my truck, my workplace, even my favorite coffee shop. According to what we've pieced together from evidence and your niece's statement, Your wife and Herbert Vaughn have been planning this for at least 6 months, Riley explained. The plan was to make your death look like suicide. They had detailed knowledge of your military service, your struggles with what they assumed was PTSD. I laughed bitterly. I don't have PTSD. My military service was the best years of my life. They were counting on no one questioning that narrative too closely. Military suicide rates, financial stress, a middle-aged man facing a life crisis. It would have been a neat package. He showed me more photos, forged suicide notes in what was supposed to be my handwriting, staged evidence of depression and financial troubles, even a fake diary detailing fictional struggles with war trauma. Herbert Vaughn is more than just a yoga instructor, Riley continued. He's got a record, fraud, identity theft, at least 2 previous relationships where wealthy partners died under suspicious circumstances. Nothing ever stuck, but the pattern is there. And my wife. Your wife provided him with everything he needed to know about you, your assets, your vulnerabilities. She also provided him with access to your niece. The words hit me like a physical blow. What do you mean, access to Kelly? Riley's expression darkened. Your wife picked Kelly up from school yesterday. Told your brother Doug that you had requested a sleepover as a surprise. Doug trusted his sister-in-law, so he let Kelly go. My hands clenched into fists. She used my relationship with my brother to kidnap his daughter. The plan was to hold Kelly somewhere safe while they staged your suicide. Then, as the grieving widow and aunt, your wife would be the perfect person to comfort the family. No one would suspect her of involvement. But something went wrong. Herbert got impatient. According to Kelly, she overheard them arguing about money. Herbert wanted to move faster, take some assets, and disappear. Your wife wanted to stick to the original plan. During their argument, Kelly managed to slip away. I studied the crime scene photos more carefully. The warehouse was littered with fast food containers, evidence of longer occupation than initially planned. There were sleeping bags, camping equipment, and children's toys. Jesus Christ, I whispered. How long were they planning to keep her there? Unknown. But Mr. Graham, there's something else. Riley pulled out another set of documents. We've been investigating your wife's financial activities. She's been moving money around for months, setting up accounts in her maiden name, purchasing life insurance policies you probably don't know about. He was right. I trusted Cheryl to handle most of our finances. I made good money as a construction project manager, and she'd always claimed to be detail-oriented about budgets and investments. I've been grateful to have that responsibility off my plate. She's been systematically positioning herself to benefit from your death, while making it look like you were struggling financially. Classic life insurance fraud, but executed with someone who knew you intimately. How much money are we talking about? Between various policies, your military pension, and asset transfers, approximately $2.8 million. I sat back in my chair, stunned. I'd known we were comfortable, but I hadn't realized how much my military service and years of hard work had accumulated. Cheryl had turned our financial security into my death warrant. There's more, Riley said quietly. We found communications between your wife and Herbert going back over a year. This wasn't a crime of passion or opportunity. They've been planning this methodically. He showed me printed emails and text messages. Reading them was like swallowing glass. Cheryl discussed me like I was a problem to be solved, an obstacle to be removed. Herbert laid out detailed plans for my murder with the casual tone of someone planning a weekend trip. In one particularly nauseating exchange, they discussed what Cheryl would wear to my funeral, how long she should wait before publicly dating Herbert, and whether she should keep my dog or have him put down because he might be inconvenient. Mr. Graham, I know this is overwhelming, but I need to ask, do you have somewhere safe to stay? Family you trust completely? I thought of my brother Doug, probably pacing the hospital waiting room, wondering why his 7-year-old daughter was traumatized and his sister-in-law was in police custody. Doug was solid, former Navy, built like a linebacker, with a moral compass that pointed true north. If anyone could help me process this nightmare, it would be him. My brother. But detective, what happens now? What's the legal process? Your wife and Herbert Vaughn are being charged with conspiracy to commit murder, kidnapping, insurance fraud, and several other felonies. The evidence is solid. Your niece's testimony physical evidence from the warehouse, financial records, and their own communications. When do they get out on bail? Riley's smile was grim. Given the severity of the charges and the flight risk, I doubt they'll get bail. But even if they do, it'll be substantial. I nodded, but my mind was already working beyond the legal system. 20 years in the military had taught me that sometimes justice and the law were two different things. Sometimes you had to take care of problems yourself. Detective, I need to see my niece. The hospital will allow family visits. But Mr. Graham, he leaned forward, his eyes serious. I've seen men in your position before. Men who've been betrayed this completely. Don't do anything that will ruin your life or separate you from the family you have left. I met his gaze steadily. Detective, I appreciate your concern, but you don't know me well enough to worry about what I might do. As I left the police station, my phone buzzed with a text from Doug. Hospital room 314. Kelly's asking for you. But first, I had a stop to make. I needed to go home and see what remained of my life, and I needed to start planning what came next. Because Detective Riley was wrong about one thing. He thought the legal system would provide justice. I knew better. Real justice would require a more personal touch. Chapter 3. The Reckoning Begins. Doug Crawford was standing in the hospital corridor when I arrived, his massive frame filling the space between the vending machines. At 6'4" and 240 pounds of solid muscle, my younger brother had always been physically imposing, but tonight he looked like a man barely containing volcanic rage. 23 years, James, he said without preamble, his voice low and dangerous. 23 years that woman sat at our dinner table, held my daughter, called herself family. I clasped his shoulder, feeling the tension radiating through him like a live wire. How is she? Physically fine. Mentally, he ran a hand through his graying hair. She keeps asking if the bad people are going to come back for you. She thinks it's her fault somehow. It's not her fault. She saved my life. I know that. You know that. Try explaining it to a 7-year-old who watched her aunt plan her uncle's murder. Through the window of room 314, I could see Kelly curled up in the hospital bed, dwarfed by white sheets and surrounded by stuffed animals that nurses had brought her. Her dark hair was clean now, brushed back from a face that looked far too serious for someone who should be worried about nothing more than second-grade spelling tests. The police told me about the plan, Doug continued. Insurance money, staged suicide, the whole sick scheme. But James, there's something else. Something I need to tell you before you see Kelly. I turned to face him fully. Doug had the same gray eyes as our father, and right now they were filled with a pain that went beyond anger. Cheryl came to see me 3 weeks ago. Said she was worried about you, that you'd been acting strange, talking about not wanting to be a burden to anyone. She suggested I might want to spend more time with you, help you through whatever you were going through. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. She was setting up the narrative, making sure family members would remember you being concerned about my mental state. Exactly. And I believed her, James. I actually thought you might be struggling with something and were too proud to ask for help. I was planning to come by this weekend for a beer and a conversation. You couldn't have known. But that's not the worst part. Doug's voice dropped even lower. She asked me about Kelly's school schedule. Said she wanted to surprise you by having Kelly over for a weekend, maybe take her to that new amusement park. I gave her all the details, when Kelly got out of school, which days I worked late, when my wife Claire would be traveling for work. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. They didn't just grab her on impulse. They planned which day to take her. Yeah, and I handed them the blueprint. Before I could respond, a small voice called out from the hospital room. Uncle James? Is it you? We entered the room together, and Kelly immediately reached out for me with thin arms. I gathered her carefully, mindful of the 4 line in her small hand. Hey, little warrior, I said softly. I heard you were pretty brave tonight. I was scared, she whispered against my neck. But I remember what you taught me about being brave. You said brave people do the right thing, even when they're scared. That's right, and you did the right thing. You saved me, Kelly. Aunt Cheryl said she loved you. But people who love you don't try to hurt you, do they? The question hit me like a punch to the gut. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that sometimes the people we trust most are the ones who hurt us the worst? No, honey, people who really love you don't try to hurt you. Sometimes grown-ups pretend to love someone when they don't really. Like lying. Exactly like lying. She was quiet for a moment, processing this with the serious concentration that children bring to understanding adult failures. Uncle James, are you going to be okay? I looked into her trusting eyes and made a promise that would shape everything that followed. Yes, Kelly, I'm going to be more than okay. The people who try to hurt us aren't going to bother anyone ever again. Doug caught something in my tone, a hardness that hadn't been there before. He gave me a sharp look, but said nothing in front of Kelly. After we tucked her in and she'd finally fallen asleep, Doug and I walked to the hospital cafeteria. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows on empty tables and chairs. What did you mean back there? Doug asked. About them not bothering anyone again. I studied my brother's face. Doug had served 8 years in the Navy, including 2 deployments to the Middle East. He understood that sometimes the world required a harder justice than courts could provide. The legal system will do what it can, I said carefully. But people like Herbert Vaughn don't learn from prison time. They just get better at hiding what they are. And Cheryl looked me in the eye tonight and mouthed, "You should have died." She's not the woman I married, Doug. She's something else entirely. Doug was quiet for a long moment, stirring coffee he wasn't drinking. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that they made this personal when they brought Kelly into it. They traumatized a 7-year-old girl to steal money and have me killed. That goes beyond anything the courts can address. James, you need to be careful. I can't lose my brother or my daughter's uncle because you did something stupid. I'm not going to do anything stupid, I said, meeting his eyes. But I'm going to do something permanent. Over the next hour, I laid out what I'd learned from Detective Riley, the scope of the betrayal, and the cold calculation behind it all. Doug listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each detail. The warehouse they held Kelly in, he said finally. You know who owns that property? I shook my head. It belongs to Gustavo Pike. Remember him? He ran that construction company that went under about 5 years ago. Word is he's been involved in some shady stuff since then. Money laundering, drug distribution, human trafficking. Something clicked in my mind. Herbert Vaughn had to have connections to get access to that warehouse. This isn't just insurance fraud, Doug. This is bigger. Yeah, and that means Herbert has friends we don't know about. Dangerous friends. Good, I said, and Doug raised an eyebrow at my tone. Because dangerous people tend to have dangerous enemies. And enemies can be useful. What are you planning, James? I stood up, suddenly feeling more focused than I had since this nightmare began. I'm going to give Herbert Vaughn and my wife exactly what they try to give me, a permanent solution to their problem. And how are you going to do that without ending up in prison yourself? I smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. Doug, I spent 20 years in military intelligence. I know things about people that they don't know I know. Herbert and Cheryl think they're the predators in this situation. And they're wrong. Dead wrong. They just woke up something they should have left sleeping. As we left the hospital, I was already forming the outline of a plan. Herbert Vaughn and Cheryl had used my trust against me, had turned my family into weapons for their scheme. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd left me alive and given me motivation. Over the next few days, while they sat in jail believing they'd been caught by simple bad luck, I would systematically dismantle their lives, their futures, and their hope for mercy. They wanted James Graham dead. I was going to grant their wish. The old James Graham would die, and what emerged would be their worst nightmare. Chapter 4. The Man Behind the Mask. 3 days after Cheryl's arrest, I sat in the lawyer's office that had handled our estate planning, staring at documents that revealed the true scope of my wife's betrayal. Patricia Thompson, our attorney for the past 15 years, looked as shaken as I felt. James, I need to apologize, she said, her usually steady voice trembling. Your wife came to see me 6 months ago. She requested changes to your will and power of attorney documents. She claimed you were suffering from service-related stress and wanted to ensure she could handle your affairs if something happened. What kind of changes? Patricia slid a folder across her mahogany desk. She wanted to be made the sole beneficiary of everything. Your military pension, the house, all bank accounts, and life insurance policies. She also requested medical power of attorney, claiming you'd asked her to handle any health decisions if you became incapacitated. I reviewed the documents, noting the careful legal language that would have given Cheryl complete control over my life and death. Did you process these changes? No, and thank God I didn't. Something felt wrong about the request. You'd never mentioned any health concerns or psychological issues in our previous meetings. You seemed like one of the most stable clients I had. So what did you do? I told her I needed to meet with both of you together before making such significant changes. She became agitated and said you were too proud to discuss your problems with outsiders. When I insisted, she said she'd convince you to schedule an appointment, which never happened. Exactly. She called several times over the following months, each time more insistent. The last call was 2 weeks ago. She was angry, said that if I wouldn't help her protect her husband's interests, she'd find an attorney who would. I leaned back in the leather chair, pieces of the puzzle falling into place. She needed those documents to complete the fraud. Without legal authority over my affairs, any suspicious death would trigger investigations. James, there's something else. Patricia opened another file. I did some checking after your wife's arrest. She consulted with 3 other law firms in the past month, trying to find someone who would process those documents. Did anyone agree? Oliver Farrell at Farrell & Associates took the case. He processed new documents, making your wife your sole beneficiary and giving her broad power of attorney. The documents are dated last week. I felt my jaw clench. Oliver Farrell was a bottom feeder who'd been censured twice by the state bar for questionable practices. If you needed legal work done without too many questions asked, Farrell was your man. Here's the interesting part, Patricia continued. Farrell required a substantial retainer, $25,000. Your wife paid it in cash. Cash. Where the hell did she get $25,000 in cash? That's what I'm wondering. James, I think you need to understand that your wife's betrayal goes deeper than insurance fraud. This has been a long-term operation. After leaving Patricia's office, I drove to the construction site where I worked as a project manager. Merritt Construction, ironically named, considering my wife's maiden name, had been my employer for 8 years. I'd built a reputation as someone who got projects done on time and under budget, no matter how complex. My foreman, Perry Yoder, met me at the trailer that served as our on-site office. Perry was approaching 60, with the weathered hands and sharp eyes of someone who'd spent 40 years in construction. He was also one of the few people I trusted completely. Heard about your troubles, James, he said without preamble. Anything you need, you let me know. Actually, Perry, there is something. I need information about Gustavo Pike. Perry's expression darkened. Pike? That's a name I haven't heard in a while. Why are you asking about that piece of garbage? He owns the warehouse where they held my niece. I think he's connected to this whole thing. Perry poured 2 cups of coffee from the perpetually brewing pot in the corner. Pike went dirty about 3 years ago, after his construction business failed. Started laundering money for some very bad people. Word is he's involved in everything: drugs, guns, human trafficking. What kind of very bad people? The kind that make people disappear permanently. James, if Pike is involved in your situation, you need to be very careful. This isn't just about insurance money anymore. I'd suspected as much. Herbert Vaughn was too smooth, too prepared for this to be his first time manipulating someone into a grave. Perry, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Shoot, if someone had hurt your family the way mine's been hurt, what would you do? Perry was quiet for a long moment, staring out the trailer window at the skeleton of the building we were constructing. I'd make sure they never hurt anyone else's family, even if it meant going outside the law. James, the law is a luxury for people who've never had someone try to murder them and kidnap their kids. Sometimes you have to handle things yourself. And if I needed help handling things? Perry turned to face me, his gray eyes steady. Then you'd have it. No questions asked. That afternoon, I met Doug at a shooting range outside town. We'd been coming here together since we were teenagers, and the familiar smell of gun oil and cordite was oddly comforting. Doug was already at our usual lane, methodically putting rounds through the center of a paper target. Any word from the police about when they'll be arraigned? He asked, not looking up from his shooting stance. Next week. Bail hearing is Thursday. You think they'll get out? Probably. Herbert's got money from somewhere. and Cheryl's got no prior record. They'll make bail, and then they'll disappear. Doug lowered his pistol and turned to face me. Unless someone stops them first. That's what I'm thinking. We shot in comfortable silence for a while, the repetitive bang of gunfire providing a rhythm for my planning. I'd always been a good shot, but military training had made me exceptional. Doug was equally skilled. The Crawford brothers didn't do anything halfway. I've been thinking about what you said at the hospital, Doug said eventually. About them having dangerous friends. And I did some asking around. Gustavo Pike isn't just connected to criminals. He's connected to Colin Sanderson. The name hit me like a physical blow. Colin Sanderson was the closest thing our area had to a crime boss. Drugs, prostitution, illegal gambling, loan sharking. If you needed something illegal done, and you had enough money, Sanderson's organization could handle it. How connected? Pike handles property for Sanderson's operation. Warehouses, safe houses, meeting places. The warehouse where they held Kelly? It's part of Sanderson's network. I absorbed this information, my mind racing through implications. If Herbert was connected to Colin Sanderson, then this wasn't just insurance fraud. This was organized crime. Doug, I need you to understand something. If I go after these people, it's going to get ugly. Real ugly. Are you prepared for that? James, they kidnapped my daughter and try to murder my brother. I'm prepared for whatever it takes, even if it means we might not come back from it. Doug's smile was cold as winter steel. Especially then. As we packed up our gear, I outlined the beginning of my plan. It was ambitious, dangerous, and would require perfect timing. But it would give Herbert Vaughn, Cheryl, and their criminal associates exactly what they try to give me. A permanent solution to their problem. When do we start? Doug asked. Tonight. We're going to pay a visit to Oliver Farrell and find out exactly how much my wife paid him and where that money came from. And if he doesn't want to talk, I checked the magazine in my concealed carry pistol and slipped it back into its holster. Then we'll convince him that talking is his best option. The old James Graham would have waited for the legal system to handle everything. But that man was dead, killed in the moment when his wife looked him in the eye and wished he died. What remained was someone much more dangerous, someone who understood that mercy was a luxury he could no longer afford. Chapter 5. Gathering Intelligence. Oliver Farrell's law office occupied the second floor of a rundown building in the older part of town, wedged between a pawn shop and a check-cashing store. The kind of neighborhood where people minded their own business and didn't ask too many questions about what happened after dark. Doug and I waited in my truck across the street, watching the windows of Farrell's office. It was 9:30 p.m., well past normal business hours, but the lights were still on. Through the grimy windows, we could see Farrell moving around, apparently working late. He's alone, Doug observed, adjusting the night vision scope we'd borrowed from his police contacts. Security system looks basic, just door sensors and maybe a motion detector. Any cameras? One outside the front entrance, pointed at the street. Nothing covering the back alley. I check my watch. Give it another 15 minutes. Let the street clear out completely. We'd spent the afternoon doing reconnaissance, mapping escape routes, and identifying potential complications. I'd also made some calls to old military contacts, men who understood that sometimes justice required an unofficial approach. The plan was simple. Get Farrell alone and find out exactly how much he knew about Cheryl's activities. If he was just a corrupt lawyer taking money for document fraud, we'd scare him and move on. If he was more deeply involved, the conversation would get more intensive. James, Doug said quietly, you sure about this? Once we cross this line, there's no going back. They crossed the line when they put their hands on Kelly. Everything after that is just consequences. At 9:45, we moved. Doug went around to cover the back exit while I approached the front door. The building's main entrance was secured with a simple lock that took me less than 30 seconds to bypass. Skills learned in places the Army didn't officially acknowledge. Farrell's office was on the second floor, accessed by a narrow staircase that creaked under my weight. I could hear him moving around inside, shuffling papers and talking on the phone. Perfect. I waited at his door, listening to his conversation. He was talking to someone about moving money, using language that suggested this wasn't his first time handling questionable transactions. When his call ended, I knocked. We're closed, came the irritated response. Mr. Farrell, I need to discuss the documents you prepared for my wife, Cheryl Merritt. The silence that followed lasted 10 seconds too long. When the door finally opened, Farrell's face was pale and sweaty. He was a thin man in his 50s, with the look of someone who'd spent years cutting corners and making compromises. Mr. Graham, I heard about your wife's situation. I'm sorry, but I can't discuss client-privileged information. You can and you will, I said, stepping into his office and closing the door behind me. Because if you don't, this conversation is going to become very unpleasant very quickly. Farrell backed away, his hands raised defensively. Look, I just prepared some legal documents. Standard stuff. I didn't know about any criminal activity. $25,000 in cash isn't standard payment for will modifications, Oliver. Where did that money come from? I don't know. Your wife said she'd been saving it. I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo of Kelly in a hospital bed. This is my 7-year-old niece. Your client and her boyfriend kidnapped her as part of a plan to murder me and steal my assets. So I'm going to ask you again, where did the money come from? Farrell's face went white. Jesus Christ, I didn't know about any kidnapping. I swear I didn't know. But you knew something was wrong with the transaction. Yeah, okay, yes. The cash payment was unusual, and your wife seemed intense. But Mr. Graham, I've got gambling debts. I needed that retainer. I sat down in the chair across from his desk, my posture relaxed but my eyes hard. Tell me everything you know about my wife's activities. Every conversation, every transaction, every person she mentioned. For the next 20 minutes, Farrell spilled everything. Cheryl had approached him 6 weeks earlier, claiming she needed power of attorney documents because her husband was suffering from PTSD and making poor decisions. She'd been insistent that the documents be prepared quickly and discreetly. She came back 3 times to modify the language, Farrell explained. Each time, she wanted broader authority. The final version gave her control over everything: your finances, medical decisions, even the right to make funeral arrangements. Did she mention Herbert Vaughn? Once. She said her business partner needed to review the documents before finalization. I got the impression this partner was financing the operation. What kind of operation? I don't know specifics, but your wife mentioned they were planning to relocate after your affairs were settled. Somewhere tropical, she said. I leaned forward. Oliver, who else knew about these documents? Nobody. Your wife insisted on complete confidentiality. Think harder. Did you make copies? Did anyone else in your office see them? Farrell's eyes darted toward a filing cabinet in the corner. I might have mentioned the case to Colin Sanderson. There it was. The connection I'd been looking for. Why would you discuss my wife's legal matters with Colin Sanderson? Because he's one of my primary clients. And because he asked me to let him know if anyone came to me with unusual requests involving large sums of money. The pieces were falling into place. Colin Sanderson wasn't just connected to this scheme. He was likely the one financing it. Herbert Vaughn was just the muscle, and Cheryl was the inside access. Sanderson was the brains behind the operation. Has Sanderson asked you to do work for anyone else recently? Anyone matching Herbert Vaughn's description? Yeah, actually, about 3 months ago, he had me prepare identity documents for a guy named Herbert. New social security number, birth certificate, the works. Herbert was planning to disappear with a new identity. That's what it looked like. I stood up, having gotten what I came for. Oliver, you're going to do exactly what I tell you. And if you do it right, you might live through this. What do you want? You're going to call Colin Sanderson and set up a meeting. Tell him you have information about the Graham case that he needs to hear in person. He'll kill me if he finds out I talked to you. He'll kill you anyway, Oliver. You're a loose end. The only question is whether you die as his victim or as someone who helped take him down. Farrell's hands were shaking as he reached for his phone. When do you want this meeting? Tomorrow night. Somewhere public, but private. A restaurant with back rooms. And Oliver, yeah. If you try to warn Sanderson or anyone else about this conversation, I'll make sure you suffer before you die. Are we clear? Farrell nodded rapidly, sweat beading on his forehead. As I left his office, I felt the familiar calm that came with having a clear mission and the tools to complete it. Colin Sanderson thought he was the predator in this situation, using Herbert and Cheryl to eliminate an obstacle and steal a fortune. He was about to learn that sometimes the prey bites back. Chapter 6. Setting the Trap. The meeting was set for 8 p.m. at Moretti's, an Italian restaurant on the outskirts of town that catered to people who valued privacy over ambience. Colin Sanderson had agreed to meet with Oliver Farrell in one of the back dining rooms, supposedly to discuss complications with the Graham case. Doug and I had spent the day preparing. We'd acquired equipment that wasn't available through normal channels, surveillance gear, weapons that couldn't be traced, and most importantly, leverage that would ensure Colin Sanderson's cooperation. "You sure about this approach?" Doug asked as we conducted final equipment checks in an abandoned warehouse 20 minutes from the restaurant. "Once we take Sanderson, there's no walking away from this." "I'm sure. These people try to murder me and traumatize a 7-year-old girl. They don't get to walk away from that." We learned more about Colin Sanderson's operation through contacts Doug had in law enforcement. Sanderson ran a sophisticated criminal enterprise, but he had weaknesses. He was a family man with a wife and teenage daughter who knew nothing about his criminal activities. He was also paranoid about law enforcement, which made him predictable. "Farrell called an hour ago," Doug reported. "Sanderson is coming alone, as expected. He doesn't want witnesses to whatever Farrell has to tell him." "Perfect. You're in position at the restaurant." "Yeah. Kitchen staff is gone by 7:30, and the owner leaves by 8. After that, it's just Sanderson, Farrell, and us." I checked the recording equipment one more time. Everything Sanderson said tonight would be documented, and if he was smart, he'd realize that cooperation was his only option for survival. At 7:45, I took my position in the restaurant's basement, accessing it through a delivery entrance that Doug had unlocked earlier. The building was old, with a layout that provided multiple entry and exit points. Perfect for what we had planned. Through the surveillance equipment Doug had installed, I could hear Oliver Farrell pacing nervously in the back dining room. He was terrified, which was exactly how I wanted him. Scared people made mistakes, and mistakes created opportunities. At exactly 8 p.m., Colin Sanderson arrived. I'd seen photos of him, but meeting someone in person always provided details that pictures couldn't capture. Sanderson was in his late 40s, well-dressed, but not flashy, with the kind of cold eyes that suggested he'd done terrible things and slept well afterward. "Oliver," Sanderson's voice came through clearly on the surveillance feed. "You said there were complications with the Graham situation." "Yeah, there are. James Graham came to see me last night. I thought Graham was in protective custody. He was, but apparently he's been released. Colin, he knows about the documents I prepared. He knows about the cash payment, and he's asking questions about you." The silence that followed lasted long enough for me to move into position outside the dining room. Through a crack in the door, I could see Sanderson's face, and it wasn't happy. "What exactly did you tell him, Oliver?" "Nothing. I swear I didn't tell him anything important." "But you told him something. I might have mentioned that you were a client. That's all." I heard the distinctive sound of a pistol being cocked. "Oliver, you've become a liability." That was my cue. I pushed through the door, my own weapon drawn, and aimed at Sanderson's head. "Drop it, Colin. Nice and slow." Sanderson was good. I had to give him that. He didn't panic or make any sudden moves. He carefully placed his pistol on the table and raised his hands. "James Graham, I presume. I have to admit, I didn't expect you to be this proactive. People keep underestimating me. It's becoming a theme." Doug entered through the kitchen door, his rifle trained on Sanderson from a different angle. We now had complete control of the situation. "Oliver, you can leave," I said without taking my eyes off Sanderson. "And Oliver, if you ever speak about tonight to anyone, I'll find you." Farrell practically ran from the room, leaving the three of us alone. "So, Colin," I said, settling into a chair across from him, "let's talk about your business relationship with my wife and Herbert Vaughn." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Wrong answer." I nodded to Doug, who moved closer to Sanderson. "Let me explain how this works. You're going to tell me everything you know about the plan to kill me, and in exchange, I'm going to let you live. And if I don't, then your wife, Anna, gets a visit from some very unpleasant people who will explain in detail what her husband does for a living." Sanderson's composed expression cracked slightly. You wouldn't involve civilians. You involved my 7-year-old niece. That makes your family fair game. For the next hour, Colin Sanderson told us everything. The plan had been his idea from the beginning. Identify wealthy targets with unfaithful spouses, recruit the spouse as an inside accomplice, and stage elaborate insurance frauds. Herbert Vaughn was his specialist in this type of operation, a sociopath with a talent for seduction and manipulation. How many times have you done this? I asked. Graham is the 4th target. The previous 3 were all successful. You mean 3 other people are dead? Yes. And their spouses? Relocated with new identities after collecting the insurance money. They get to keep 30%, I get 70%. What about Herbert? Herbert gets a flat fee for his services, plus whatever personal items he can liquidate. He's not in it for the money. He enjoys the manipulation. I felt my jaw clench. We weren't just dealing with insurance fraud. We were dealing with serial killers. Where are the previous targets' families now? I don't know. Once they get their cut of the money, they disappear. That's the arrangement. But you could find them if you wanted to. Probably. Doug leaned forward. Colin, those families deserve to know what happened to their relatives. You're going to help us find them. And in exchange, I said, you get to live long enough to see the inside of a federal prison instead of the inside of a coffin. You're going to turn me over to the FBI? Eventually. But first, you're going to help us deal with Herbert Vaughn and my wife. Sanderson's eyes narrowed. What do you want me to do? You're going to arrange for Herbert to escape from jail. And when he does, he's going to find out that some problems can't be solved by running away. And your wife? My wife made her choice when she decided I should die. Now she gets to live with the consequences. As we prepared to leave Moretti's, Colin Sanderson secured and ready for transport to a location where he could contemplate his cooperation, I felt the satisfaction of a plan coming together. Herbert Vaughn and Cheryl thought they were the hunters in this situation. Tomorrow, they would learn that they'd been wrong from the very beginning. The prey had become the predator, and the hunt was just beginning. Chapter 7. The Escape. The jailbreak happened exactly as we'd planned. Colin Sanderson had contacts throughout the region, including guards at the county jail who were willing to overlook certain security lapses for the right price. At 3:17 a.m. on Tuesday morning, Herbert Vaughn walked out of his cell and through a back exit that had mysteriously been left unlocked. Doug and I watched from across the street as Herbert emerged from the jail, wearing civilian clothes that had been left for him in a predetermined location. He looked confident, probably believing that Sanderson's resources had saved him from prosecution. He had no idea he was walking into a trap. He's moving toward the parking garage, Doug reported through our radio link. Black sedan, license plate Charlie Delta 749. I see him. Stay in position until he's clear of the downtown area. Herbert drove carefully, following traffic laws and avoiding any behavior that might attract police attention. He was good at this, probably had experience evading law enforcement from previous jobs. But we were better. I followed at a distance, using techniques learned in military surveillance operations. Herbert was heading east toward the interstate, probably planning to disappear into another state where Sanderson had safe houses and new identities waiting. He's taking exit 47. I radioed to Doug, who was paralleling our route on surface streets, heading toward the industrial district. Copy that. I'm moving to intercept position. The industrial district was perfect for what we had planned. Abandoned buildings, minimal traffic, and no surveillance cameras. Herbert parked outside a warehouse that looked identical to dozens of others in the area, but I knew this one was special. It was where Colin Sanderson stored equipment and conducted business that required complete privacy. Herbert used a key to enter through a side door, clearly familiar with the location. He was probably planning to collect money and identity documents before disappearing permanently. Instead, he was about to face the consequences of his choices. Doug and I waited 15 minutes before moving, giving Herbert time to settle in and relax his guard. When we finally approached the warehouse, we could see light coming from windows on the second floor. Motion sensors are disabled, Doug whispered, checking the security system from outside. Sanderson's cooperation is paying off. We entered through the same door Herbert had used, our weapons drawn and ready. The warehouse was filled with stolen merchandise, drug packaging equipment, and other evidence of Sanderson's criminal empire. But we weren't there for evidence. We were there for justice. Herbert was in the second-floor office, counting money from a safe that had been left open for his convenience. He had his back to the door, completely focused on his task. "Hello, Herbert." He spun around, his hand reaching for a pistol on the desk, but Doug was already behind him with a rifle pressed against his neck. "I wouldn't," Doug said calmly. "James has questions for you." Herbert's face cycled through surprise, fear, and then calculation. Even caught red-handed, he was looking for angles, for ways to manipulate the situation to his advantage. "James Graham, I have to admit, I'm impressed. Most people don't recover this quickly from having their lives destroyed. Most people don't have their lives destroyed by psychopaths and their cheating wives." I settled into a chair across from him, keeping my pistol trained on his chest. "Herbert, you and I are going to have a conversation about your previous work. Specifically, the 3 other people you've murdered for Colin Sanderson." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Wrong answer." I nodded to Doug, who pressed the rifle barrel harder against Herbert's neck. "Let me be clear about something. You're not leaving this warehouse alive unless you tell me everything I want to know. And if I do tell you, then you get to choose how you die." Herbert's confident facade cracked slightly. "You're not a killer, Graham. You're a construction manager, a family man. You don't have it in you." "You're right," I said. "The old James Graham wasn't a killer. But that man died when you and my wife decided I should. What's left is someone much more dangerous." I showed him photos on my phone, surveillance images of his previous victims, crime scene photos, and pictures of the families he destroyed. "Thomas O'Brien, age 45, married 20 years. You seduced his wife, Linda, convinced her to help you stage his suicide. Thomas had 3 kids who still believe their father killed himself because he couldn't handle being a failure." Herbert's expression didn't change, but I could see recognition in his eyes. "Jeffrey Livingston, age 52, widowed and remarried. You targeted his second wife, Patricia, convinced her that Jeffrey was planning to divorce her and leave her with nothing. Jeffrey died in what looked like a hunting accident. And Jim Gould, age 38, whose wife Sarah thought she'd found true love with a yoga instructor who understood her better than her husband did. Jim died in a house fire that destroyed all evidence of the insurance fraud." I leaned forward, my voice low and dangerous. 3 men dead, 3 families destroyed. Also, you and your accomplices could steal money and start new lives. And now you try to add me to that list. "Those men were weak," Herbert said, his mask finally slipping to reveal the monster underneath. "They trusted their wives, believed in love and loyalty. They deserved what they got for being naive." Doug's grip tightened on his rifle. "You son of a bitch." "Herbert," I said calmly, "you just made this very easy for me." "What do you mean?" I was going to give you a choice about how this ended. But after hearing you dismiss 3 innocent men as deserving death for the crime of loving their wives, I've made the choice for you." I stood up, checking my weapon. "You're going to call my wife." "What?" "You're going to call Cheryl and tell her that you've escaped, that you need her to meet you somewhere isolated so you can disappear together. She'll never agree to that. She's in jail. Actually, she's not. Colin Sanderson arranged for her release on bail this morning. She's staying at the Comfort Inn on Route 9, probably wondering why you haven't contacted her." Herbert's eyes widened as he realized the scope of our planning. "You orchestrated all of this." "That's right. And when Cheryl arrives to meet you, she's going to discover that some betrayals have permanent consequences. You're going to kill us both. Eventually. But first, you're both going to confess to the murders of Thomas O'Brien, Jeffrey Livingston, and Jim Gould. You're going to provide details that only the killers would know. And you're going to do it because the alternative is much, much worse." I showed him photos of the warehouse's basement, where Colin Sanderson had conducted interrogations for clients who needed information extracted from uncooperative subjects. "Herbert, you have 2 choices. You can cooperate and die quickly, or you can refuse and spend the next several days wishing you'd cooperated." Looking into my eyes, Herbert Von finally understood that he'd misjudged his victim. The man he'd planned to murder wasn't weak or naive. He was someone who understood that mercy was a luxury that had to be earned. And Herbert Von had done nothing to earn it. Chapter 8. The Final Meeting. The call went exactly as I predicted. Herbert, his voice steady despite the rifle barrel pressed against his spine, contacted Cheryl and arranged to meet her at an abandoned gas station 15 miles outside town. He told her he'd escaped with Sanderson's help and had money and new identities waiting. All she had to do was meet him at midnight for their new life together. Cheryl agreed without hesitation, proving once again that she cared nothing for the husband she'd planned to murder or the niece she'd traumatized. She sounded excited, Herbert said after ending the call, like this was all just an adventure to her. Some people are monsters, I replied. The only difference is that most monsters don't hide behind wedding rings and family barbecues. Doug and I spent the rest of the evening preparing the abandoned gas station for our final meeting. It was perfect for our purposes, isolated, no surveillance cameras, and multiple escape routes if law enforcement became involved. Not that we planned to leave any loose ends that would require investigation. At 11:30 p.m., we moved Herbert to the location. He was secured but mobile, able to play his part in the reunion we'd orchestrated. The plan was simple. Let Cheryl believe she was meeting her lover for a romantic escape, then confront them both with the evidence of their crimes and the consequences of their choices. She's coming, Doug reported from his observation position. Single vehicle, matches the description of her car. Through the night vision scope, I watched my wife of 23 years drive toward what she believed was freedom. She'd dressed for travel, practical clothes, minimal jewelry, probably carrying cash and new identity documents. She looked happy, more animated than I'd seen her in months. That happiness was about to end permanently. Cheryl parked next to Herbert's car and got out, looking around nervously before approaching the gas station's main building. Herbert emerged from the shadows, and I watched through the scope as they embraced. It was the first time I'd seen them together, and the casual intimacy between them made my stomach clench. 23 years of marriage, and she'd never looked at me the way she was looking at Herbert Vaughn. James, Doug's voice came through the radio. You sure you want to go through with this? I'm sure. I moved closer, keeping to the shadows until I was within 20 feet of their reunion. They were talking in low voices, probably discussing their escape plans and their new life together. Did you get the money from Sanderson's safe? Cheryl asked. All of it. $200,000 in cash, plus the new identity documents. By tomorrow morning, Herbert and Cheryl will be dead and Marcus and Diana will be on a plane to Costa Rica. And James is yesterday's problem. By the time they find his body, will be untouchable. That was enough. I stepped out of the shadows, my weapon drawn, and aimed at Herbert's center mass. Hello, Cheryl. My wife spun around, her face cycling through shock, fear, and then cold calculation. Even caught in the act of planning my murder, she was looking for angles. James, I can explain. No need. I heard everything I needed to hear. Doug emerged from his position, his rifle covering both of them. We now had complete control of the situation. Sit down, I ordered, gesturing to an old picnic table near the gas station. Both of you. They complied, Herbert's confidence finally beginning to crack. Cheryl, however, maintained her composure. She'd always been good under pressure, a trait I'd once admired. James, you have to understand, she began. Our marriage had been dead for years. We were just going through the motions. So you decided to kill me instead of asking for a divorce. It wasn't personal. It was just practical. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Practical. Like kidnapping my niece was practical. We needed leverage to ensure you followed the plan. Kelly was never supposed to be hurt. She's 7 years old, Cheryl. She's traumatized because her aunt plotted her uncle's murder. How is that not hurting her? She'll get over it. Children are resilient. I looked at this woman I'd shared my life with for over 2 decades and realized I'd never really known her at all. The capacity for this level of casual cruelty had always been there. I'd just been too trusting to see it. Herbert, I said, turned to face him. Tell Cheryl about Thomas O'Brien. I don't know who that is. Thomas O'Brien, Jeffrey Livingston, Jim Gould. The 3 other husbands you've murdered. Tell her how this ends for couples who think they can kill for money. Herbert's face went pale. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You're a serial killer who specializes in insurance fraud. Cheryl thought she was your partner, but she's just another disposable accomplice. I turned back to my wife. Cheryl, did Herbert tell you what happened to his previous partners? Linda O'Brien, Patricia Livingston, Sarah Gould. What about them? They're all dead. Convenient accidents after the insurance money was collected. Herbert doesn't share, and he doesn't leave witnesses. Cheryl looked at Herbert with dawning horror. Is that true? It doesn't matter now, Herbert said, his voice tight with desperation. We're all dead anyway. Not all of us, I said. Just the two of you. For the next hour, I laid out everything we'd learned. The scope of their criminal enterprise, the murders they'd committed, and the trail of destroyed families they'd left behind. I showed them photos of their victims' children, read them excerpts from the fake suicide notes they'd forged, and detailed the cold calculation behind every aspect of their operation. You stole 23 years of my life, I told Cheryl. Made me believe we had something real while you planned my murder. You traumatized my niece, destroyed my trust in everything I thought I knew about love and loyalty. James, I'm sorry. I never wanted. You're not sorry. You're just sorry you got caught. I was right, and we both knew it. Even now, facing certain death, Cheryl was calculating, looking for ways to manipulate the situation to her advantage. Herbert, I said, you're going to write a confession detailing every murder you've committed, every family you've destroyed. You're going to provide details that only the killer would know. And if I refuse, then your death will take considerably longer. Herbert looked into my eyes and saw his own death reflected there. Whatever he saw convinced him that cooperation was his only option for a quick end. As dawn broke over the abandoned gas station, Herbert Vaughn and Cheryl Merritt completed their written confessions. They detailed 3 previous murders, multiple insurance frauds, and a criminal conspiracy that had spanned 5 years in 4 states. James, Cheryl said as I prepared to end their story. Do you remember our wedding day? You promised to love me forever. I kept that promise, I replied. But the woman I made that promise to never existed. What happened next was justice, swift, final, and absolute. Herbert Vaughn and Cheryl Merritt got exactly what they'd planned to give me, with one crucial difference. Their deaths served a purpose beyond greed. The confessions would provide closure for 3 families who'd spent years believing their loved ones had committed suicide. Law enforcement would finally have answers to cases that had gone cold. And James Graham would have the peace that comes from knowing that some debts can only be paid in blood. Chapter 9, New Beginnings. 6 months later, I sat on the porch of cabin in the mountains of North Carolina, watching my niece Kelly play with a golden retriever puppy I'd bought her for her 8th birthday. The nightmares had finally stopped, and she was laughing again, a sound that had become the most beautiful music in the world. Doug emerged from the cabin carrying 2 beers and settled into the chair beside me. FBI called this morning. They closed the O'Brien case. Linda O'Brien finally has answers about what really happened to her husband. How is she handling it? Better than expected. She said knowing the truth was better than wondering for the rest of her life. The confessions Herbert and Cheryl had written before their deaths had provided law enforcement with everything they needed to close 4 murder cases and expose a criminal conspiracy that had operated across multiple states. Colin Sanderson's cooperation had led to the discovery of additional crimes and the arrest of dozens of associates. Officially, Herbert Vaughn and Cheryl Merritt had died in a murder-suicide at the abandoned gas station. Security footage from a traffic camera had captured them arriving separately, but shown no other vehicles in the area. Their bodies were discovered with their written confessions and evidence of their previous crimes. The investigating officers had concluded that the stress of their arrest and impending prosecution had driven them to this final act. Case closed. Any regrets? Doug asked, not for the first time. None. Even about Cheryl? I thought about that question seriously. 23 years of marriage should have meant something, should have created some emotional debt that would generate guilt or remorse. But the woman who died at that gas station wasn't the woman I'd married. That woman had never existed. What I'd killed was a lie, a carefully constructed facade that had hidden a monster. The woman I married died years ago, I said finally. I just didn't realize it until she tried to kill me. Kelly ran up to the porch, the puppy bouncing around her feet. Uncle James, can we go fishing this afternoon? Absolutely. Did you practice tying those knots I showed you? Yes. Watch. She demonstrated a perfect, improved clinch knot, her small fingers working with the confidence of someone who'd mastered a new skill. Perfect. You're ready for the advanced lessons. As she ran back to play with the puppy, Doug smiled. She's going to be okay. Better than okay. She's going to be strong. My phone buzzed with a text message from Patricia Thompson, my attorney. The estate settlement was finally complete. With Cheryl dead and her crimes exposed, I was the sole inheritor of our assets. The life insurance money she'd tried to steal would instead fund Kelly's college education and provide financial support for the families of Herbert's victims. Justice served, Doug observed, reading the message over my shoulder. Justice served. That afternoon, while Kelly and I fished in the stream behind the cabin, she asked me a question that had been weighing on her mind. Uncle James, are there other bad people like Aunt Cheryl and Herbert? Yes, honey, there are. Will they try to hurt us? I looked at this brave little girl who'd saved my life by risking her own and made her a promise that would shape the rest of my existence. Not if I find them first. That evening,